Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Enjoy the fanfic, and let's begin part 1. Yuki Rito watched as his secret, or not so secret crush, depending on who you were, walked past him in the hallway at his school. Like most people, Rito was a fairly normal high school student, with no real unusual or unique features. He was 16 years old and stood at about 164 centimeters. He was neither skinny nor fat and didn't look all that athletic. His eyes were a slight golden brown and he was wearing the standard green pants and tie with a white undershirt and light tan blazer combo of the school he went to. The only feature about him that could be considered unique was his messy orange hair, an unusual color no matter where you were. Today's the day, he thought to himself in determination. There was a fire in his eyes that were only present on days like this. Day in which he decided to confess to the girl he loved. Today's the day I confessed to Haruna-chan. Ever since he had first met his crush, Haruna, a rather pretty girl in his grade with purple hair and eyes, it had been love at first sight. Her beauty had always astounded and affected him in ways no other female ever had. But it was her kindness that had truly earned her Rito's love. I'm going to do it. He could see it all now. He would walk up to Haruna, boldly and with a confident gait never before seen. He would get down on one knee, taking her hand in his and professing his love for her. Then he would ask her to be his girlfriend, and she would say, confessing to Haruna again today, Rito. Yes, today I'm gonna. Rito started only to stop as he realized the voice had come from directly behind him. Ah! With a loud shout he spun around to look at the person that had managed to sneak up on him. Said person was a young man wearing the same clothing as him, green pants and tie with a tan blazer. He had spiky blonde hair that went down to his shoulders, with 2 jaw-length bangs framing his face and a spiky fringe hovering over his eyes. Said eyes were blue and held a piercing quality that Rito had always found unnerving. He always felt those eyes were looking into his very soul. Perhaps the oddest feature about this man were the 6 whisker marks on his face, 3 on each cheek, running horizontally across his face. Damn it, Naruto. How many times have I told you not to sneak up on someone like this? You always do this, constantly sneaking up behind other people and scaring the living daylights out of them. Especially me. Finished with his tirade, Rito stopped, his shoulders hunching as he began breathing heavily, looking for all the world like he had just run a marathon. Ha ha ha. Gomen, Naruto said, waving a hand in front of his face as if to ward off Rito's comical anger. Not that he seemed to be all that affected by the orange-haired teen's anger. Indeed, it looked as if he found more amusement in Rito's blustering than anything else. So, the blonde started again, a sly look on his face as he leaned down to look at Rito face to face. Being one of the tallest people in school, close to 5'8", most of the students only reached chest height with Naruto. In order to look at people eye to eye, the blonde needed to lean or bend down. I see you're going to confess to Haruna-chan again today. You know, this will the 256th time you do this. So far you've failed at every single attempt at capturing her heart. Are you sure you're up to this? Of course I am sure. This time will definitely be different. Rito said, holding a shaking fist up to his face. That's exactly what I was hoping you would say. Naruto smirked at Rito, making said male blink at him in confusion. The blonde's smirk widened as he said, you're going to succeed this time because I'm going to help you. Rito gaped at the whiskered male. That's right, Naruto said. Ever since I came to this high school I've had to watch your terrible attempts at confessing to Haruna. The first time it was funny, watching you fail so miserably that you actually ran home during lunch. The second time it was funny, the third it started getting old, and now, the blonde shrugged. Let's just say watching you fail consecutively so many times is beginning to get too painful for me to watch. Therefore, I am going to help you confess to her. How? Asked Rito, scratching the back of his head in confusion. Easy, we're going to walk up to her and you're going to confess. Now, come on. Naruto didn't even give Rito a chance to say anything after that as he grabbed the orange-haired teen by the jacket and began dragging him along. Let's go find Haruna-chan. Wait. Rito struggled to remove the blonde's hand, or at least make Naruto stop. It was unfortunate for him that Uzumaki Naruto was the strongest person in school, even the PE Teacher wouldn't dare mess with him, especially after the last time he was humiliating in front of the entire student body by the whiskered male. I can't do it right now. I have to get the timing right. If you wait until you feel the timing is right, then we're going to be waiting forever, Naruto shot back. Your sense of timing sucks. That's half the reason you haven't been able to confess to Haruna-chan. Seriously, every time you feel the timing is right, something bad happens. Which is exactly why I'm choosing the timing for you. Now stop struggling, it will only make things that much harder for you. Despite his friend's advice, Rito continued struggling against the blonde. This resulted in him getting bodily dragged throughout the school in front of the entire student population. It was fortunate for Rito that Naruto was the one dragging him, otherwise people might have made fun of the 16-year-old high school student. As it was, the blonde that was effortlessly hauling him around cut an imposing enough figure that none of the male population dared to say anything against him. They soon found Haruna with 3 of her friends. Without even thinking about it, Naruto walked right up to the group and cut into their conversation. "Excuse me," he said, grabbing their attention. He gave the group a smile. "I was wondering if you 3 could help me with something." Rito almost groaned when 3 of the 4 girls began to swoon over the blonde. Aside from being the most athletic and academic student in school, Naruto was also the most popular, especially with the girls in school. His handsome features combined with his open and easygoing attitude had drawn nearly all of the girls to him. The fact that almost every girl also seemed to have this strong urge to touch his whisker marks, all of them claiming they were the cutest things they had ever seen, only added to his general appeal. This had led to many of the male students hating Naruto, though few would actually try and harm him. Rito was just glad that Haruna didn't seem to be affected by his looks and personality to any serious extent. "How can we help you, Naruto-sama?" asked the girls in their girlish and excitable voice. It was a typical response and Rito had gotten used to it by now. He didn't know why the girls called him Sama, but then, none of the other guys did. Though there was much debate on the subject, in truth, Rito didn't really care. Naruto pulled the 3 girls aside and huddled with them. "Listen, my friend is having some troubles confessing to the girl of his dreams, and so I've decided to help give him a push in the right direction. I want you girls to help me take Haruna-chan and Rito to the equipment shed and lock them inside." The 3 looked unsure at his request, and so the blonde decided to use his secret weapon. "If you do this, I promise to take each of you out on a date." "A date?" the girls said at the same time. It was an eerie form of synchronicity that only females could accomplish. For several seconds the 3 high school girls stood still, their face going red and their eyes glazing over as they imagined a date with the blonde. One of the girls ended up getting a nosebleed and actually looked close to passing out. In the end they agreed to help Naruto, stating, "While we don't really like Yuki-san, we'll agree to help since it's you asking." "Excellent," Naruto said, standing up and clapping his hands together in gratitude. He rushed back over to Rito and Haruna, both of whom had been standing together awkwardly, and smiled. "All right, you 2, time to go." "What? Wait. Hold on a moment. Where are you taking us?" Rito shouted as he and Haruna were both lifted into the air. Naruto ignored the orange-haired teens shouting, along with the startled and frightened noises Haruna was making as they ran through the school was once again. It wasn't long before they reached the equipment shed located on the opposite side of the school. Acting before Rito could even gain his bearings, Naruto threw both him and his crush into the shed, closed and locked the door. "Naruto!" Rito shouted as he stood up, rushed over to the door and grabbed onto the handle. He tried opening it, even going so far as to place both his feet on the wall in an effort to get some leverage. Yet no matter how hard he tried, the door would not budge. "Hey! Naruto! Let me out! Let me out! I can't do it like this! You need to let me out!" Despite his shouting, Naruto seemed to be ignoring him. That, or he had already left, which wouldn't surprise Rito one bit. Sighing, the orange-haired high schooler dropped to the floor and wondered what he should do next. As he did, a small piece of paper fell out of the inside of his blazer. Curiously, he picked it up and uncrumbled the sheet. On it was the neat handwriting that he recognized as Naruto's. It said, "By now I'm sure you've noticed that the door to the room is locked. I've also taken the liberty of barring the windows. I regret that it has come to this, but until you confess to Haruna I won't let you out. That said, there is food located in a fridge that I have hidden behind the basketball storage bins in the corner. Since I don't know how long it will take until you confess, I figured you might need something to keep you satiate. Good luck, Naruto. At the end of the message was a chibi Naruto with a fox-like grin, holding out up the peace sign. Rito felt his eyes twitching as he stared at the letter. Somehow, I feel I should have seen this coming, he said to himself. The entire year I've known him, Naruto has never been able to keep out of other people's business. And now I'm stuck here with Na. Trailing off at the end, he blinked several times as the realization hit him. He was alone with Haruna. Now's my chance, he thought to himself, his excitement beginning to rise. Now's my chance to finally confess to Haruna. If I get out of this alive, I'll have to thank Naruto for being so nosy. Anyo, Yuki-kun. At the sound of the feminine voice, Rito froze. Turning, he found Haruna standing not 3 feet away from him. She was looking down at the ground, her eyes occasionally moving up to meet his, only to look away a few seconds later. Rito gulped. Come on, Rito. Now is your chance. You can't screw this up. He stuttered out, only to stop when Haruna looked at him. Gulping, he tried again. Haruna looked at him, blinking as a confused expression crossed her face. She looked slightly concerned because of how much Rito was stuttering. Were said male more attentive, he might have noticed. As it was, he was so busy trying to get the words out that he couldn't even think straight, much less notice the small nuances that dictated female behavior and emotions. Come on. You can do this, Rito. Just say it. Say it. I like you, he shouted, bowing down at the waist so he wouldn't have to look at Haruna. Said girl's eyes widened as she took a step back. Not seeing the action, Rito continued. I've liked you for a really long time. And I was hoping. That is, if you want to. I was hoping you would go out with me. Rito kept his eyes closed, his body bowed low, for fear that Haruna would reject him. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, beating nearly 2,000 miles a minute. It felt like it was attempting to beat its way out of him, it was going so fast. His nerves were beginning to fray as the silence continued. Maybe he shouldn't have confessed to her. What if she didn't like him? What if she thought he was weird? Or gross? Or some kind of loser? She could think he wasn't worth her time and tell him that she didn't want anything to do with him. Or, Okay. Rito blinked, looked up at Haruna, then blinked again. Said girl blushed as she looked down at her feet. I would like to go out with you too. The truth is, I've always liked you. Rito found himself gaping. Haruna had always liked him. Why hadn't he known this? Unknowing of his inner thoughts, Haruna continued. Yuki-kun has always been a kind person. You were always taking care of the plants after school, making sure they were watered. Most people forget about watering the plants after school, but you never failed to tend to them. That's why I admire Yuki-kun a lot. You like me? Asked Rito, making sure he had heard her correctly. Haruna looked away, looked back, nodded once, then looked away again. Still wanting to be sure she liked him, he said, then, will you go out with me? Haruna blushed as she looked at him. A wide smile split Rito's face as he jumped up, grabbing Haruna in his excitement and spinning her around, much to said girl's embarrassment. Unbeknownst to them, one blonde-haired, blue-eyed male was hidden amongst the equipment. He looked at them with a smile before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Several miles outside of school, Uzumaki Naruto stopped walking as the memories of his clone hit him. He looked back at the school, a small smile playing on his face. Way to go, kid, he said softly to himself. A rueful chuckle escaped his lips. Who would have thought that after living for somewhere around 3,000 years I would be reduced to playing matchmaker between high school kids? Shaking his head, Naruto turned around and restarted his walk home. As he did, his eyes took in the city he was currently living in. While Tokyo had been the center of Japan for a long time, it always amazed the blonde how much it had changed in the past 100 years. When last he had been in the city, somewhere around 1 to 150 years ago, it had been a decent-sized city with closely spaced buildings and shops. Now it was a bustling metropolis of large, towering skyscrapers, crisscrossing highways, and heavily populated suburban areas. The place Naruto was living in at the moment was one of the less populated housing districts on the outskirts of Tokyo. Far enough away that he wasn't hemmed in by the crushing population of the big city, but close enough that it would only take a 2-hour train ride to reach the center. The district he was living in was a nice, albeit plain residential area. The houses were all the same, standard 2-story buildings with a slanted roof, a balcony and a small backyard. There were only small differences to distinguish one house from another, those being the tiny altercations made by the people who lived there. A variation in a person's garden here, a small flag hung up on a roof there, diminutive yet significant contrasts that allowed Naruto to tell who lived where. His own house was located on a corner, in fact he lived right next door to Rito Yuki. That was actually how they had become friends. Him living so close to the nice yet clumsy teen had ensured that the young man would be the first person Naruto met. And having seen the kid and how horrible his luck was in many areas, the blonde had decided to more or less take Rito under his wing. Even if that was sometimes more of an occupational hazard than a privileged position. Normally I'd be walking home with Rito, Naruto mused with a grin. I wonder how he and Haruna are getting along. I should probably inform Mika-chan that her brother isn't going to be coming home anytime soon. With that thought in mind, Naruto walked up to the house belonging to Rito and his younger sister. Stopping at the entrance, he rang the doorbell, then crossed his arms and leaned against the wall while he waited. Coming, came a shout from the inside. The sound of footsteps resounded from behind the door. A few seconds later, the front door opened and Yuki Mikan's head peeked out from the crack. Yuki Mikan was a cute 12-year-old girl with brown eyes and long brown hair that was standardly done up in a slight ponytail that made the back top part of her head look like a pineapple. The hair that she didn't catch in her ponytail, which was quite a lot, was let down to flow behind her back, stopping at mid-back. She was wearing a pair of short jeans that stopped at mid-thigh, and an orange sweatshirt with a yellow undershirt. Despite her young age, she was already beginning to develop a womanly figure, and Naruto knew when she got older that Rito would have his hands full trying to keep men away from his younger sister. The minute the girl saw him, she swung the door open the rest of the way and rushed forward, smashed into his torso, engulfing him in a hug as she shouted. Naruto ni-chan. Hey there, Mika-chan, Naruto said with a chuckle as he ruffled Mikan's hair. When he had first moved in and met and befriended Rito, he had been invited over to the orange-haired teen's house. It was there he had met Mika for the first time. At first, things had been very awkward for the blonde and Rito, as the young girl seemed to have developed one of those love at first sight crushes on him. It was not the first time such a thing had happened when Naruto met the younger or older sister of a person he became friends with. He even remembered one case in England when he had been posing as a college student and met with a friend's mother. The woman had been a 30-something-year-old widow with her husband dying in World War II, and when she had met him had done her best to seduce him. It hadn't worked, and Naruto thankfully managed to leave the country after faking his death. Since then he had been careful on how he reacted when meeting new girls. Thankfully the girl's crush only lasted for a month, and since then Naruto had been something of a second older brother, or the older brother she always wanted if one went by Mikan's words. This of course was a point of contention and much teasing between the three of them. Mikan would always complain that Rito was an unreliable and useless brother, while Naruto would tease Rito about being cooler than him and Mikan about having a crush on her second, Oni-chan. Rito would always end up skulking in a corner with a rain cloud over his head, and Mikan would blush up a storm. They were fun times in Naruto's opinion. He would be sad when he was forced to leave this place. What are you doing here? Mikan asked. Then she looked around. And where is Rito? Oh, he's going to be a bit late, Naruto replied with a smile and a hum. Mikan looked at Naruto suspiciously. What did you do? A grin worked its way to the blonde's face. Oh, nothing much. Just locked your brother in a gym equipment locker room with Haruna-chan. They won't be able to open the door for another. Naruto paused to look at his watch. 2 hours. I figured that would be enough time for him to finally man up and confess. So you finally decided to get involved in Rito's relationship problems, Mika said. She shook her head and sighed. I was honestly wondering when you would finally grow tired of watching him flounder around. I swear he's useless when it comes to women, and a lot of other things. Ah, now don't be dissing on your brother, Naruto chided. He's just not as experienced, well-traveled or awesome as I am. It's only natural that it would take some time getting his cool factor up to snuff, that, and several pushes in the right direction. Right, Mikan said with a sweat drop forming on the back of her head. So are you staying for dinner then? It's Monday, so normally you would stay with us for dinner, right? Not today, Naruto replied. With Rito stuck with Haruna for the next few hours, I think it would be best if I stayed home. Who knows what kind of things you might try and do to me if we were all alone. B. Baka, Mikan stuttered with a slight blush. I wouldn't do anything like that. Good to know, Naruto chuckled before ruffling the girl's hair. Mikan blushed harder and shoved his hand off, making him smile. Anyways, I just came to tell you that, I'll see you later. Okay, bye, Mikan said as she shut the door. Naruto walked over to his house, unlocked the door and stepped inside. He made his way into the kitchen, walking over to his pantry and opened it. Inside were several hundred boxes of instant ramen. They filled the entire pantry, covering every square inch. Even after thousands of years, his love of ramen had not diminished, and despite being capable of cooking other foods, ramen would always remain his #1 favorite. Hence the reason he had what had been lovingly dubbed the ramen pantry by him. What should I go with today? Mumbled Naruto as he grabbed several cups of ramen and looked them over. Miso, chicken, pork, beef, shrimp, crab. After several minutes of this, he decided to go with one of each flavor, that way he wouldn't have to feel so conflicted about his food choice. Besides that, cup ramen was small and unfilling. He only ate instant ramen when he didn't feel like cooking his own meals. Ripping the tops off, Naruto poured water into each cup and placed one of them in the microwave. He waited the 3 minutes it took to make the ramen, complaining the whole time. Damn instant ramen. How can it be instant if it takes 3 minutes to cook? You'd think that after 3,000 years someone would find a way to make instant ramen truly instant. Maybe I should that. There might even be a profit in it if I can cut into the ramen market. His thoughts were cut off as the chime of the microwave sounded. He quickly opened the door, took the ramen out, placed another one in, started the timer again, then began eating the already made ramen. This act was completed several times as he would eat his ramen, while waiting for the other ramen he had in the microwave being made. When the blonde was done, he threw the cups away and headed upstairs. He entered the bathroom not long after, stripped out of his clothes and folded them up before putting them in a basket. After walking into the room on the opposite side of the changing room, he went over to the tub and turned on the water. There was a slight glow on the faucet as the seals began working, heating up the water in the bathtub quicker than it would normally. While waiting for the tub to finish filling up, Naruto used the shower head to wash himself off. As he cleaned up, he let his mind wander. His thoughts took him to the past, a place they usually went when he let them. He had lived a long life. Due to a combination of his Uzumaki heritage, his abilities as a sage, and an all-powerful, world-destroying demon sealed inside of his gut, he had gained what many would-be madmen dreamed of: immortality. However, while someone like Orochimaru would have orgasmed at the thought of being an all-powerful immortal, to Naruto it was more of a curse than anything else. His life had been filled with being alone. Even when he was with the friends he made in whatever century he was living in, the feeling never really left. It only stayed its hand for a time. Everyone in Seinen High says I should get a girl, he chuckled a bit at that. The male population at school, with the sole exception of Rito, hated him due to the fact that so many of the girls swooned over him, yet he refused to date a single one of them. Not to say he hadn't gone on dates, but he always felt there was difference between going on a date and dating someone. He switched off the water, both to the tub and the shower head, before sinking himself into the steaming liquid. A sigh escaped the blonde's lips. Even if I were to get a girlfriend, it would never last, would it? Eventually I would be forced to leave before people discovered I was immortal. I wonder how all of the friends I made would feel if they knew my secret. A dry laugh escaped his throat. They'd probably be frightened and run off. Even if they didn't, how could I have any kind of serious relationship when they're just going to die a few decades later anyways? His thoughts trailed off as he leaned back in the tub and shut his eyes. He must have fallen asleep, because the next thing he knew there was a bright flash of blue light coming from the water. An explosion caused the water in his tub to shoot into the air, and Naruto was so surprised by the sudden and unprecedented attack that the old and disused ninja instincts he had long since had were unable to actually prevent him from doing anything other than throwing his hands out in order to protect himself. In doing this, the first thing Naruto's hands were not any kind of painful attacks, not the sting of some form of weapon or the burning or cutting of a jutsu. No, the moment his hands went out to ward off whatever attack was coming his way were a pair of well-defined and Naruto opened his eyes, which had closed during his attempt to shield himself from what he had assumed was an attack on his person. He blinked several times when he saw his hands groping a set of beautiful. They were large. If Naruto had to guess, he would say they had a total circumference of 89 centimeters. Yet despite being completely free of the confines of a bra, they didn't sag. Almost in a trance, Naruto moved his hands along the silky skin. They moved away from the center and he got a good look at the that dotted the center. The areola was a light shade of pink, with the being only one tone darker in color. Still surprised, Naruto's hands moved on instinct, his thumb and forefinger light pinching the and giving them a tweak. A slight moan from the female he was touching brought his mind back into the focus. He looked up and found his breath hitching in his throat. Nestled in between his legs was a highly attractive teenage girl with long bubble-gum pink hair, emerald green eyes, and a curvaceous, almost perfect, hourglass figure. Her most distinguishing feature was the tail, which extends down from the base of her back. It was long, thin, and ended with a heart-shaped tip. It seemed to move behind her at random, and Naruto couldn't help but wonder if it was real or not. She reminded him of Sakura, a much hotter Sakura with a larger chest and wider hips, but the green eyes and pink hair was almost identical to those of the girl that had been his first crush. The memories seeing this girl brought back were almost physically painful, and it took an effort of will to push them back. Escape successful, the girl said, snapping Naruto out of his momentary lapse of reality. He blinked as the girl's eyes focused on him, and for a single, solitary second the blonde's old fear of women, one that was ironically enough brought about by his first crush, came back, and he was almost sure this girl would attempt to beat him within an inch to his life, despite the fact that she was the one who had randomly appeared within his tub. She did none of those things, instead smiling as she said, "Hello." Naruto opened his mouth, but no words came out. It took a few moments to get his vocal cords to respond, and when they finally did, he said, "Hello. Who are you?" It was perhaps not the most elegant or relevant question he could have asked, but sometimes it was better to start off with the small things and work your way up. He was still having trouble processing the fact that some random hot female with a tail had appeared in his bathtub. "I'm Lala, from the planet Deviluk," the girl replied. "Uh-huh." Naruto nodded noncommittally. "So you're an extraterrestrial then?" "Yes, I suppose an earthling like you could call me that," she replied. She got another nod in response as Naruto's brain finally fully rebooted. He decided to ignore the fact that she was an alien for now, he would deal with it later. Looking at the girl in his tub for a moment, he computed the best course of action to take in a situation like this. Thankfully, living for 3,000 years had more or less desensitized him to most of the situations life could throw at him. Standing up, Naruto unplugged the drain to the tub and stepped out. The girl's eyes followed him as he grabbed 2 towels, walked back over to her and held out the second one to her. "Wrap this around yourself and come with me, I'll make some tea and you can explain to me why you suddenly appeared in my bathtub." "Okay," Lala replied. Oddly enough, she didn't seem at all bothered by the fact that she was, nor the fact that she had just been groped by Naruto. She simply wrapped the towel around her body and stepped out of the tub. What followed were several long minutes of silence as Naruto led Lala to the living room and had her sit down. He then went into the kitchen and selected some tea, an herbal tea that he had created from the garden he had out back. Hopefully it would help him keep calm, because despite the fact that he had seen much in his life, the events of a few minutes ago still had him somewhat shell-shocked. When the tea he was finished, he poured the steaming liquid into a pair of cups, grabbed them and walked back into the living room. There he found Lala sitting on the couch, a cheerful and inquisitive expression on her face as she looked around the room. Her tail was wagging behind her in a fashion that almost seemed to mirror the look on her face. "Here you go," he said, setting the tea down. He received a thank you and took a seat on the chair to the left of the couch. Taking a sip of his tea, Naruto sighed as he felt a slight wave of heat move down his throat, then encompassing his whole body as the soothing herbs relaxed his mind and muscles. It seemed to have a similar, possibly even more pronounced affect on Lala. As soon as she took a sip, her entire body seemed to sag as a groan escaped her lips. Sugoi, she said as she sunk into the couch. This tastes so good. Thank you, Naruto replied as he took another sip of tea before setting it down on a glass holder. Now, why don't I start this off by introducing myself? My name is Uzumaki Naruto. Pleased to meet you, Naruto-kun, Lala said, and Naruto actually blinked in surprise when she just automatically added an affectionate suffix to his name. Normally a girl would wait at least a day before calling him that, though the girls in his class this century seemed to prefer calling him Naruto-sama. He shook the thought off as irrelevant and continued. Nice to meet you too, Lala-san. I hope you don't mind me asking about why or perhaps how you suddenly appeared in my bathtub. Ah, that would be because of the Pion warp kun that I made. Lala announced proudly as she held out her wrist and showed him a small device attached to it. The thing looked like a silver creature bracelet. It had a centerpiece that looked like some kind of alien creature with a heart-shaped head that held a pair of red eyes, connected to a heart-shaped body that was attached to a tail by a pair of claws on either side. It was a very odd-looking device, and not something Naruto had ever seen. Given that it was apparently an alien artifact, he wasn't all that surprised. Lala continued her explanation of the device as Naruto looked it over. Although I can't define where it goes, it can instantly warp a living thing for a short distance. I see, Naruto said. Curiosity got the better of him and he switched from the chair to the couch, sitting next to Lala as he looked at the bracelet. So basically it's like some kind of teleportation device that allows for short distance, instantaneous transportation a certain distance away. It's randomized so you don't actually know where you'll warp to. However, I'm going to hazard a guess and say it's some kind of last-ditch escape device, used only in dire circumstances. He looked from the Pion warp kun to Lala. Am I right? That's right, Lala said. For some reason she seemed happy that he understood what she was saying, perhaps even overly happy for something so simple. I used it when I was in the escape pod of my spaceship, and by chance I ended up in your bathtub. That makes sense, I guess, Naruto replied. He frowned as another thought occurred to him. And why are you? Ah, well, it only warps living things, so objects like clothes are left behind, Naruto finished, earning a slightly embarrassed smile from Lala. It seems like it has a few kinks that need to be worked out, but I think that's a really awesome device. And you say you built it? That's impressive. Ah, thank you, the girl replied with an enthusiastic and happy smile. It was so innocent and infectious that Naruto actually found himself smiling as well. He couldn't really say whether he was pleased or displeased with this situation, but if nothing else, this girl had just helped him cure several thousand years' worth of boredom. You're welcome, he said. So, awesome warping device aside, I suppose the next question I want to ask is why you had to use something like this in the first place. Lala smiled as she let one of her hands trail along the wrist holding her warp device. I was being chased, she said. Naruto narrowed his eyes a little but didn't speak, letting her continue unabated. I thought I would be safe if I escaped to Earth. But the pursuers came and my ship was broken down. I was almost captured and brought back. She held up her arm holding the bracelet. If it wasn't for this bracelet, I would have been taken. I see, Naruto said, more for wanting to say anything than actually having something to say. He took in a deep breath and blew it out before deciding on his course of action. I won't force you into telling me why you're on the run, it's not really any of my business. But I will help you out while you stay here. Ah, you will, said Lala, her eyes going impossibly wide as a hopeful smile shone on her face. Of course, I can't just leave someone in need of help to fend for themselves, Naruto said with a shrug. He would have said more, but before he could speak again, Lala had launched herself at him, knocking him to the ground as she held him in a fierce hug. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, she said in a repeating mantra. In her enthusiasm, the towel she had been wearing fell off, and Naruto was forced to take a deep, shuddering breath as he felt her rubbing themselves against his still bare chest. The skin-on-skin contact reminded him that neither of them were dressed in anything more than towels, and Lala was now in less. Pushing his admittedly lewd thoughts to the far reaches of his mind, Naruto brought himself into a sitting position and did what he could to pry the girl off. She had a surprisingly strong grip, and he was actually forced to reinforce his muscles with chakra, something he hadn't done for a long time, in order to get her off of him. "You're welcome," Naruto said. He stood up and had to re-wrap his towel as it threatened to come off. He held his hand out to Lala, which was taken by said girl as he pulled her to her feet. He was just about to suggest they move upstairs so they could get dressed when the door behind him opened. Spinning around, the blonde was just about to attack whoever had broken into his house when his eyes spotted an odd-looking creature with black bat-like wings and swirly eyes fly past him. "Lala-sama," it shouted as it jumped into Lala's waiting arms. "Thank God you're okay, Lala-sama." "Peek," Lala replied with just as much enthusiasm. "I'm glad to see you're safe too. Thank goodness the ship didn't leave the Earth's atmosphere yet." It was here that Naruto decided to interrupt. "So, Lala, who's the weird-looking creature?" Said creature turned to look at him and Naruto couldn't be sure, due to the swirl eyes, but he almost thought it was glaring at him. Weird-looking," it said in an insulted tone. "Ah, this Peek," Lala introduced. "An all-purpose costume robot that I made. Nice to meet you," it said, seeming to have forgotten Naruto's insulting comment. "Pleased to make your acquaintance as well," Naruto replied. "Costume robot, huh? So then I take it Peek can transform into clothing, right?" "That's right. Peek, do your thing. Asu. Transform. Dress form," Peek shouted before he began to glow. Naruto watched in interest as the little robot seemed to burst and transform into what looked like some kind of rope that surrounded Lala. It wrapped itself around her legs, then her rear end. Naruto actually gulped when it tightened around her shapely, an action which was repeated when it did the same thing to her. There were several flashes of light as the ropes seemingly transformed themselves into clothing. Really, Lala's clothing looked more like a female-shaped, life-sized version of Peek. Though Naruto had to admit she looked very cute, and her outfit seemed to suit her. Of course, since he could see every crevice and curve of her body, Naruto wouldn't complain. He may not consider himself a pervert, but he was still a male. "Is it too tight, Lala-sama?" asked Peek, making Naruto blink when he heard the voice. "Nope, it's perfect," Lala told her. "Clothes." She held up her arms and moved around a bit, causing her to jiggle. "It's great that you were able to come here so quickly." She spun around a few times, letting the skirt-like part of her clothing spin a bit. After a few test spins, she turned to Naruto and smiled. "Well, what do you think? It looks good, right?" "It's cute," Naruto said. "I've never seen an outfit quite like that before." "Tee-hee," Lala giggled. "By the way, Lala-sama," Peek interrupted. "What do you plan to do now?" "Ah, Naruto-kun has agreed to help me," Lala exclaimed. Just then said blonde's senses went on high alert as he felt two presences approaching his room. While his abilities seemed to have dulled from disuse, they were still quick enough that he was able to grab Lala and move her into a corner before spinning around in a defensive stance as two men in black suits and sunglasses appeared in his room. "You've been quite troublesome to track down," one of them said, seeming to ignore Naruto's presence. "I'll have to make sure the freedom of your hands and feet are taken away before we leave Earth." "Peek," Lala said in a deadpan tone. "Didn't I tell you to make sure no one followed you when coming here?" Hi. Baka robot," Lala shouted as she began pouting and waving her arms in the air in frustration. Soon enough she started moving around from one foot to the other in what looked like a comical dance, rather than the actions of someone who was angry. It was amusing to Naruto as he watched Lala berate her clothing, which was attempting to apologize. Were it not for the fact that he had two unwanted guests in his house, he would have enjoyed simply sitting back and watching the girl work herself into a frenzy. As it was, however, he still had a small problem that needed to be taken care of. Turning his eyes back to the two men, he gave them a light glare. "I don't know who you two Yakuza wannabes are, but I'm only going to give you one warning. Leave now, or suffer the most brutal kicking of your life." "You think you can scare us, kid?" asked the one with darker skin. "How about we give you a warning? Step aside or we'll have to hurt you, kid." Naruto said in disbelief. He cursed himself for being granted eternal youth with his immortality. It was one of the things he hated most. Despite his 3,000 years of age, everyone he met mistook him for a high school student. It was actually difficult just for him to get into a college because he looked so young. And while being young looking had its boons, the fact that no one seemed to take him seriously bugged the crap out of him. Looks like I'm gonna have to teach you to respect your elders, boy, Naruto spoke in a dangerous tone. His eyes were being overshadowed by his hair, blocking his angry glare from view. However, that only made the look more effective, and despite themselves, the two men shivered. Who do you think you are, punk? Shouted one of them, getting over his hesitation with bravado. I'll show you who's boss here. The man ran at Naruto, who had yet to move. It was unfortunate for the two thugs that they were too busy charging towards the blonde to notice the small smirk he had on his face. If they did, they might have been spared from the painful encounter they were about to have. As the first one, the male with darker skin came in, fist swinging in an attempt to knock Naruto upside the head. Said blonde seemingly disappeared from his view. Less than a second after that, he was introduced to a new level of pain as a foot met with his jaw, forcing his teeth to shatter as they were smashed together. The dark-skinned space Yakuza didn't even get a chance to scream in pain as he was sent sailing into, and then through the ceiling, flying high into the air where he disappeared in a small twinkle. The other man didn't stand a chance as Naruto used his great arm strength to shift his body, rotating himself and moving until his feet were pointed towards the man who was trying to halt his forward progression. Without hesitation, Naruto's feet shot out in a buck kick that caught the man dead center in his chest. There was a loud crack, followed by a whoosh of air, then a scream as the man was sent flying backwards. He crashed through the window and quickly plummeted to the ground below. Naruto breathed in and out slowly as he stood up straight and began clapping imaginary dust off his hands. And that's that, he said. Sugoi. Naruto turned around and almost shouted in surprise as he saw Lala's face right next to his. There was an odd look in her face and he could even see stars shining in her eyes. Having not seen a look quite that impressed in a long time, the blonde actually felt himself blush a bit. That was so cool, Lala exclaimed. The way you handled those two was amazing. You were all paw and pow, and they went whoosh. Her exclamations and sound effects were followed by wild hand gestures made to look like mock punches, followed at the end by her waving her arms to show how the two men he defeated were sent sailing. That was nothing, Naruto said with a grin. He quickly got his mind back on track. Getting the first thing he needed done, he opened a drawer in his dresser and dressed himself in a basic pair of black pajama bottoms and an orange tank top. As he dressed, he continued speaking. I've been trained in combat since I was 6, some loser wannabe Yakuza aren't going to be a threat to me. He paused in his self-admittedly arrogant praise when his eyes caught sight of a green, blinking light. It was connected to a device that looked like a small tube. Picking it up, he held the thing to his eyes and looked it over. What's this? He wondered out loud. Oh, that's a tracking device. Lala explained helpfully. It's used to track other people's location in case they get lost. Which means that more people like those Yakuza guys will be coming soon, Naruto reasoned to himself. He sighed. I don't want to make any more of a mess of my room than I already have. Looks like we're going to have to leave so I can find a more suitable location to fight. Lala looked at him with innocent curiosity as he moved over to her. Curiosity was replaced when Naruto scooped her into his arms, which elicited a surprised squeal from the pink-haired female. Naruto. Sorry for this, the blonde said as he hopped out of the window and onto an adjacent rooftop. But I want to move fast. It will be easier this way. Without further ado, he quickly began hopping from roof to roof, moving at a pace that no human could match. Unseen by him, Rito and Haruna, who had both managed to escape from his imprisonment of them, saw the blonde before he sped off. Was that Naruto? Asked Haruna in surprise. Rito blinked before turning to his new girlfriend. I think so. They both turned back to where Naruto had been to see that he wasn't there anymore. Both of them wondered if they might have just imagined him standing there with a pink-haired female in his arms. After all, people just didn't disappear like that. Right. As Naruto carried her bridal style while jumping across the rooftops, Lala found herself looking at the blonde's determined features. Why? Why are you helping me so much? Asked Lala. While Naruto didn't turn his head to look at her, his eyes roved down to stare into hers. He didn't even break his stride as he said, I said I'd help you, didn't I? Once I say I'll do something, I never go back on my word. But now you're being chased because of me, Lala countered. So why? That's a dumb question, Naruto said, winking at Lala to let her know he wasn't saying it to be harmful. You're in some kind of trouble, that's why. What kind of person would I be if I just left you to these people, when I know that I have the ability to help? I don't know about anyone else, but I don't want to be the kind of guy who would just leave someone like you high and dry because I didn't want to get my hands dirty. Lala's eyes widened. Naruto. Naruto reached the end of the line of houses a few seconds later. Pushing off the edge, he jumped, reaching past the wall and landing in a crouch. Utilizing the kinetic energy from the impact, he sprung forward in a burst of speed and made his way into the park. He stopped, looked around for a moment, then nodded. This looks like as good a place as any, he said to himself as he set Lala back on her feet. A good place for what? Asked Lala. Naruto grinned at her. Why? To make my grand stand, of course. While my hits were pretty hard, it shouldn't have done any serious damage beyond busting a few teeth and ribs. Those guys aren't weak enough to be anything more than dazed by my attacks. They'll be coming soon. And we can't run forever. So I need an open space in order to use more of my fighting potential. I may be a little rusty, but my skills should be more than enough to deal with goons like them. Such confidence, came a voice that resounded throughout the clearing. Naruto's eyes widened as his body acted on its own, sliding into a fighting position as he pushed Lala behind him. It didn't take long for him to spot the most likely source of the voice, a large UFO floating above his head with thousands of blinking lights on the underside. It was so bright it was a wonder no one had seen it yet. A beam of light shot out from the center and hit the ground a few meters away. Seconds later, a large man with white hair and odd segment armor and a red cape. At the same time, the two men Naruto had previously downed ran up and stepped on either side of the man who floated down from the beam of light. The blonde was pleased to see they both looked to be in pain, judging from the way they grimaced every few seconds, or rubbed the spot where he had hit them. Look at that armor, Naruto murmured to himself. I feel like I've stepped into some kind of fantasy, medieval anime or something. Man, the author must have been smoking some serious shit to cook up this guy. Zaston! Exclaimed Lala in surprise. The man looked at Naruto, who simply glared back in his crouched down position. Move aside, Earthling. This has nothing to do with you. You don't want to get involved in our affairs. Oh, I don't know about that, Naruto replied nonchalantly. It was in complete contrast with his face, which held one of those, if looks could kill, expressions. I've been getting pretty bored recently. Who knows, maybe a little excitement will help get the blood pumping. Besides, I already promised myself that I would help Lala in any way I can. That includes protecting her from you people. The man, Zaston, Lala had called him, raised an eyebrow. You don't even know what's going on here, Earthling. I'll only give you one more warning. Stand aside. Then why don't you fill me in, Naruto said. He moved, carefully placing himself directly between Lala and Zaston and his two thugs. Lala-sama has run away from home, Zaston told him. This is the 6th time she's done so. Now, stand aside. It's time for her to return home. I'm not going, Lala shouted. Successor or not, I'm sick and tired of having to sit through arranged marriage meetings every day. What you want doesn't matter. This is your father's wish. Now come here. We're going home. I don't think so, Naruto said. He absently lamented not thinking about grabbing his weapons scrolls. As thing where he would have to rely on hand-to-hand combat. He briefly thought about using jutsu, but if these men really were just trying to bring her home, then killing them was out of the question. You want her? Then you'll have to come through me. Zaston eyed the blonde for a few seconds, noting the fierce and warrior-like expression. Very well, he said at last, pulling out what looked like the hilt of a sword from his waist. Naruto had to hold in his surprise when the hilt ignited in a flash of green light. He took another moment to curse, wishing he had brought the Raijin no Ken to combat this new energy sword. I will not be held accountable if you die. Naruto snorted, you don't honestly think I'll be that easy to kill, do you? Looks like I need to teach you a lesson in manners. Naruto-kun, Lala said, tugging on his shirt. Don't worry, Lala, Naruto said without taking his eyes off Zaston. I have no intention of letting them near you. That's not what I wanted to talk about, Lala said. You don't have to fight. Please let me deal with this. Hearing her words, the blonde spared his pink-haired companion a glance. How? Like this, Lala said as she took out what Naruto at first thought was a mobile phone from somewhere. He had long stopped trying to figure out how each girl seemed to have their own pocket space for housing random items. Transfer. Go vacuum kun. A bright purple cone of light shot out from what was decidedly not a phone. Several feet in the air above them, orange matter materialized in the air. The strange substance coagulated together, forming a shape which soon took a more solid appearance. It looked like some kind of metal octopus, and Naruto recognized it as one of Lala's many inventions just from that simple observation. Oh crap! It's one of Lala-sama's inventions! Shouted one of the thugs. Said invention turned around, showing them a pair of glowing yellow eyes and a tube-like mouth. Several metal panels slid apart to reveal a hole in the mouth. Take this. Suck them up, shouted Lala. Following its creator's instructions, the metal monstrosity began sucking up everything in sight with its hose-like mouth. The air seemed to swirl in a cone shape that expanded outwards the further it got from the robot, sucking in everything from dirt to trees to the people Lala had targeted. It seemed to have some trouble with Zaston's armor, as the man got stuck with his feet sticking out of the thing's mouth, kicking and wiggling in an attempt to get out. However, soon enough the armored man was sucked inside of the robot. Naruto sighed, thinking the excitement had ended for the day. This changed when he noticed the creature was still sucking up everything in sight, including signposts, trees, the playground equipment. It even tried to consume him. Thankfully, a small application of chakra to his feet helped ground him, but if the way the gravel was sliding forward, the ground itself wouldn't hold for long. Lala, he shouted, looking at the girl as she floated several feet above the robot. Turn this thing off. Lala placed a hand under her chin and adopted a thoughtful pose. Is something wrong, Lala-sama? Asked Peak. This thing, how do I turn it off? What? Shouted Naruto in disbelief. You mean to tell me you created this thing but don't know how to turn it off? Lala looked over at Naruto and laughed as a sheepish expression crossed her face. Well, I made this so long ago that I no longer remember how to shut it off. Naruto groaned. Then I guess I need to take it out. But how to that when there are people inside is the question. Whatever he decided, Naruto knew it would have to be quick. He could feel the ground giving way under him. It wouldn't be long now before he was sucked into that thing as well. Alright, here we go. Naruto shouted as he began doing something he hadn't done in several hundred years. His hands sped through a series of seals, their movements a little rusty and slow but still faster than any other human alive could possibly accomplish. He ended them on a monkey seal. Raiden. Raikyu. A large ball of sparking lightning generated directly in front of Naruto. Its form wavering as lightning arched in and out of the jutsu. Before long it solidified, becoming a bright blue ball of lightning, which was soon launched at the out-of-control robot. It struck the metal creation right between the eyes, exploding on contact. Rather than release a large gout of flame, sparks of electricity coursed over the thing's metal hull. The robot shuddered and spasmed as its small explosions took place on certain areas like the exhaust vents, which soon began smoking. Its tails flailed wildly for several seconds in what could almost be construed as pain, were it not for the fact that the thing was not alive. It released one final spasm before its eyes dimmed and it fell to the floor with a loud crash. Phew. Naruto said, whistling and sighing at the same time. He stood up on his toes and stretched his hands above his head. It's been a long time since I've been forced to pull out any jutsu. I'm almost surprised I still remember the hand seals. Naruto-kun. Naruto turned around to see Lala float down next to him, her feet daintily touching the ground. She rushed over to him, stopping when she got directly in front of him. That was so cool, she started, giving him a big smile. I didn't know Earthlings were able to use any kind of magic. They can't, Naruto admitted. I just happen to be a special case. No other Earthling would be able to do something like what I did. Ah, sugoi. Naruto scratched the back of his head with a sheepish expression. Hearing someone praise him in such an odd voice was nice, but for some reason he felt immensely embarrassed. Just as he opened his mouth in an effort to say something cool, his eyes widened as he noticed the destruction that Lala's machine had caused. It looked like a war zone. Everywhere he looked were large gouts where trees or playground structures had been ripped out of the ground. There was quite literally nothing left of the playground. As he stared at the scene of devastation, Naruto had just one thing to say. I am so not paying for this. Walking out of a small train that had just entered one of the many stations located in Tokyo, or recently renamed Shinto-Tito, Japan, was a young-looking man. This man looked to be around the age of 18 and was fairly tall, standing at around 6'4", with shoulder-length, spiky blonde hair with two jaw-length bangs framing his face and a fringe that overshadowed a pair of cerulean blue eyes. The oddest thing about this young man were the 3 whisker marks that ran horizontally across each cheek. They were his most defining mark and often drew the most attention, especially from kids 8 and under and females of all ages. He was wearing a pair of faded blue jeans and black boots, a form-fitting white sleeveless t-shirt, a black sleeveless houri with a hood, a pair of black fingerless gloves and an armband with the symbol of a leaf on a metal plate wrapped around his left bicep. He received many odd looks, both because even though he was technically from this region he didn't look Japanese at all, as well as because of the houri since it was still pretty warm outside and most people simply didn't wear clothes like that nowadays. Not that the looks he received would cause him to change the style he had been wearing for most of his life. As the whiskered blonde walked around the city, his eyes never stopped moving. Tokyo, Japan. While I love traveling the world, for some reason it's this city that always feels more like home, no matter how many changes this place goes through. Now, let's see how much this place has changed in the last 100 or so years. XOX. Goo. Man, this place has changed so much, the blonde male complained as he got off another tram, this one leading further into the city. He had been walking and riding trains for the past 2 hours and still had yet to get a good feel for the place. Man, it looks like they changed the entire layout of this city. Now how I am going to find my publisher if I can't even find out where I am? He looked around at the large skyscrapers which seemed to tower over the city, with one large one in the center. It was a large clock tower style skyscraper, and had to be a newer addition because he had never seen it before. The streets were busy, with hundreds of moving along them, or stopped up in traffic. The people walking down the sidewalks. It was a lot busier than he had remembered last time he had been there. And in other breaking news, Hiroto Manaka, the president of the giant conglomerate MBI, has bought up 80% of all Shinto-Tito stocks. Naruto looked up at the screen when he heard the announcement to see a man with white messy hair, glasses and a high-collared cape of some kind sitting in a high-backed chair. The man looked like he was trying to pose as some kind of king with the way he was seated. That guy looks like a complete douchebag, Naruto muttered as he decided to ignore the rest of the news report, having deemed it as unimportant. It's not like knowing who was trying to take over the city would help him find his publisher. A company that has enough power to buy out the capital of Japan, huh? Reminds me of that slime bag, Gato, Naruto mumbled with a frown. That wasn't a pleasant thought, especially since he hated being reminded of the past. But these days, just about everything made him think of his life before it all went to hell. That's simply the way things were, and he had long since learned to deal with it. As he continued walking past the many people heading in the opposite direction of him, the blonde pulled out several cards from his pocket. Each one was an ID card with his picture on it, but held different information about him. Let's see now, who should I be this time? Namikaze Minato. No, I used that last time. Gamasatsu Jiraiya. No, I don't really feel like being that perv. How about Nara Shikamaru? Nah, lazy isn't my style. Uzumaki Naruto. I haven't used that one in a while, at least a few centuries, so it should be okay. Yeah, let's go with that. The original has always been my favorite anyways. Pocketing the other ID cards, Naruto placed the one he was planning on using in his wallet. Now I just need to find that. He was cut off when he accidentally bumped into one of the people around him when turning the corner, knocking them down. It was a young man with black hair and eyes who had been mumbling about, failing twice, and entrance exams, or some such nonsense. Sorry about that, the blonde said as he held his hand out to the kid. The other guy rubbed his backside before looking up. The blonde blinked when he got a good look at the kid's face. It was the kind of nondescript, I've got nothing going in my life face, that some of the younger generation seem to possess nowadays, before breaking into a sheepish smile. You okay? No. No, it's all right, I should have watched where I was going, the teen said. He looked at the hand before taking it and allowing the blonde to pull him up. I suppose we'll just say we should both be more careful, the blonde replied. Anyways, good luck on your next entrance exams. What? How did you know about my entrance exams? Asked the kid in surprise. The blonde's sweat dropped. You were just talking out loud about failing your entrance exams twice. Oh. The black-haired kid looked embarrassed. Anyways, take more care to watch your surroundings. Right. Get out of the way please. Acting on instinct, Naruto pushed the kid out of the way when he heard the shout, using enough strength that the boy was sent flying several feet back. Looking up, the blonde had just enough time to see that the girl falling before him was brunette and had extremely large, right before she smashed into his stomach with enough force to send him crashing into the ground and creating a decently sized crater. What the? Naruto blinked as he saw a well-rounded and shapely clad in white panties. While I don't like getting smashed into the ground, I can't deny that this is a nice way to make up for falling on me. The girl didn't seem to hear him because she just groaned. Hey, are you alright? Ow. I should have known that building was way too high to jump off of. The girl mumbled as she crawled off of him. Now that Naruto got a better look at her, he saw that she was a well-endowed young woman with short, brown hair and a well-developed body figure. She was wearing an interesting set of clothing that looked like something he would expect from a manga. It consisted of a short red skirt and upper clothes that resemble the traditional clothing worn by the Miko. She was also wearing a pair of red gloves that looked like they were used for battle. However, it was her chest that really got his attention. Dear Kami, I think those are bigger than Ba-chan's and Samui-chan's, were the first thoughts of Naruto as he got his first up-close glimpse of the large endowments the girl had. He had to wonder if that size were even natural nowadays. The girl turned around and Naruto got to see a face that looked way too cute and innocent to be considered legal. Oh, you're the person who caught me, aren't you? Thank you very much, she said with a smile. Naruto gave her a grin. It was no trouble, he waved off her thanks. I would hate to think of what might have happened if you had actually hit the pavement coming down as hard as you were. Are you alright? Yes. I think I'm alright, the girl said. Just then Naruto's sixth sense became blaring around the same time the girls seemed to. Watch out, she shouted as she pushed herself onto him, just in time to avoid a blast of electricity. Naruto flipped them around as they flew slightly through the air, landing on his feet and catching Musubi, who he put down a second later to prepare for their attackers. I can definitely rule out the possibility that that was ordinary electricity, Naruto thought with narrowed eyes. He looked up to see two beautiful women, twins from the looks of them, in leather bondage costumes. I think I did just step into some kind of manga. Dominatrix twins that can shoot lightning. Great, I thought I stopped dealing with violent women after Sakura-chan. You can run all you want, but nothing will come of it, the one of the left said. Naruto absently noted that her were the larger of the pair. So just fight us and we'll get this over with quickly, the other one said. I can't. At least, not right now. The brunette that had run into him said. That's too bad, because we're not stopping until we defeat you. Electricity began to form on the two girls' hands. Oh. This just sucks, Naruto muttered to himself. Though he remained nonchalant, his mind was a whirlwind of activity. I can feel the chakra flowing through them, but that shouldn't be possible. Humans have long since lost the ability to use chakra, and that's definitely no jutsu. Sorry, but I don't want to fight right now. Naruto didn't have much more time to complete his thoughts because the girl who had fallen on him grabbed his hand and began running. Of course, running would be a relative term in this instance. Where most people ran at what could normally be considered as a light jog, the girl that had grabbed his hand took off at such insane speeds that Naruto found his feet pulled off the ground and he was more or less flying behind the girl as the feeling of his arm being ripped off at the sockets came over him. He was actually so surprised by her speed that he didn't even bother to stop her as she rushed through the city like a bullet. When they finally stopped, Naruto rubbed his sore shoulder. Oh wow. I don't think I've been dragged around town that fast since Anko-chan demanded I buy her dango. He looked over at the girl and smiled. So, not that I mind being dragged behind such a beautiful woman, but care to share why you just decided to drag me with you? Ah, I'm so sorry. The girl apologized. I don't really know why I dragged you along with me, I just sort of put your hand in mine and took off without even thinking. Please forgive me. Haha. It's alright, Naruto said with a laugh. Life was getting boring anyways, so I suppose I should be thanking you for giving me some form of excitement. By the way, my name Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto. And I'm Musubi, the girl said with a very formal bow, placing her hands in front of her. This, however, had the added effect of making her push themselves together. Naruto found himself unconsciously licking his lips as he stared at the two melons on her, before shaking his head and snapping his attention to her face. Musubi. Huh. That's a beautiful name, Naruto said with a grin. The girl looked immensely happy by Naruto's compliment. She gave him a bright smile and bowed. Why thank you. I think Naruto is a nice name as well. Well, you would be the first one to think so, Naruto said with a laugh. Even most people here in Japan think my name's a little odd. Absently he wondered what the last name he used when he came into Japan was, before shrugging the thought off as inconsequential. Well, I like it, Musubi said, smiling at him. Thank you for what you did back there. It was extremely brave of you to help me out. Ma, there's no need to thank me. I didn't really do anything, to be honest. But you're welcome all the same. Naruto looked at the girl for a second, collecting his thoughts. He was just about to ask the girl why those other two were attacking her when she began to fall over. Oh! Naruto acted quickly, moving towards her and scooping her up in his arms. The blonde looked at the sleeping girl and sighed. Well, now what are you going to do, Naruto? He asked himself. The first thing I need to do is find a place to stay, a hotel or something, at least for the night. He could worry about getting a more permanent residence after tomorrow when he went apartment hunting. Right now, taking care of Musubi was more important. He had never turned away someone in need, and he wouldn't start now. His decision made, Naruto looked around to make sure no one was in sight, tensed his legs, and disappeared. XOX. Musubi woke up the next day. Yawning a little, she looked around to see that she was in a small hotel room. She was laying in a futon, and there was another futon next to hers that was ruffled and looked like someone had just gotten out of bed. She didn't feel like she was in any danger, but she was curious to know where she was and how she had gotten there. As she was continuing her observations of the room, Naruto entered through a door on her left. Seeing her up, the blonde smiled and said, "Good morning, Musubi-chan. Did you sleep well?" "I did," Musubi replied cheerfully. A confused look then crossed her face as she looked around. Where are we?" "Just a hotel room I managed to secure for us for the night," Naruto said as he walked over to her and sat down on his knees. "I didn't want to spend hours searching for an apartment while you were unconscious." "Thank you so much, Naruto-sama." Musubi gave him a cheerful smile. "You really saved me back there." Naruto chuckled at the girl's enthusiasm, though he wondered about the sama suffix. He hadn't met girl quite as gung-ho as she seemed to be. "You're welcome now." He blinked for a moment, turning his head towards the door he came out of while Musubi looked at him curiously, wondering if something was wrong. A second later he smiled and said, "You must be hungry by now. Am I right?" As if in answer to his words, Musubi's stomach rumbled. That is, if having what sounded like a roaring dinosaur shake the room, they were in a rumble. Musubi's eyes grew really large as a puppy dog-like look came to her face. It was quite easily the most adorable thing he had ever seen. Not even Ino had been able to make a face that pitiful. Yes. Naruto bit his lower lip to keep from laughing. I guess the infamous puppy dog eyes jutsu really is an instinctive technique for females. Standing up, he gave the girl a grin and said, "I'm glad to see you're hungry, otherwise all that hard work I spent making breakfast would have just gone to waste." It hadn't seemed possible, but if anything, Musubi's eyes grew even wider and her mouth began to water. "Breakfast?" she asked in a voice that sounded like someone who had been dying of thirst just found a hidden oasis. "That's right, The whiskered blonde looked at her with some form of amusement. Just wait right here and I'll bring you your breakfast. With a jaunty whistle, Naruto walked into the small kitchen and looked at the food that had been prepared. It was rather modest, all things considered, consisting of several slices of French toast, a dozen or so pancakes, bacon, sausages, and orange juice. Well, at least it was a modest meal to Naruto since he was sharing it with another person. I wonder if I should have made more, he sighed. Then again, I couldn't get very many ingredients yesterday because I haven't been able to go to a bank and get my money, so this was all I could afford. And he still didn't even know where his bank was, so all he was left with was the money he had been able to exchange before coming to Japan. Unfortunately, there was nothing he could do about that. There were simply steps he would need to take before he could even consider finding his bank. First on that list was feeding himself and Musubi. He put the food he made on 2 trays, picked them up, and walked back into the room where his brunette. Come to think of it, what is Musubi to me? He wondered as he set the food down in front of said girl, who elicited a squeal of delight as she saw all of the food piled on it. Musubi immediately began consuming the food at a pace that would have put Choji to shame. Having long since learned table manners from the various precious people he had known so long ago, the blonde ate at a slower pace so that his mind could wander. I've only known her for a few hours tops, yet I feel something for this girl. I suppose it could just be the byproduct of having not had very much human contact for a long time. Living in solitude for God knows how long would do that to a guy. And yet, I can't help but feel it's not just that. There's something about her that makes me feel emotions I haven't felt a long, long time. It was just as his train of thought was ending that Musubi finished her breakfast. She looked at Naruto as her eyes once again got big, and this time tears seemed to be leaking out of the corner of them. Noticing this, the whiskered blonde looked at her and tried his best to suppress a shudder. Yes. Oh, Naruto-sama. Thank you so much, she said in an overly emotional voice. I owe you everything. Not only did you save me, but you gave me food too. Naruto's sweat dropped. It was like she had never been shown kindness, or was just not used to people being so nice. Or she could just be naive. Shaking the thoughts off, he smiled and waved off her thanks. Don't mention, I was more than happy to help you. Personally, I believe that if you have the power to help someone in need, then you should. There's not much purpose for having the power to help others if you don't even use it, you know. Musubi looked at Naruto, eyes wide in respect. That has to be the most incredible thing I've ever heard anybody say. Hee. Well, it's just something of a personal motto I live by, Naruto replied, scratching the back of his head as he gave a sheepish laugh. The look of utter respect he was getting was actually making the blonde feel kind of embarrassed. Hey, Naruto-sama, Musubi said, making said blonde blink. Yes, I know I've already imposed on you quite a bit, but I have another favor I would like to ask you, she said, wringing her hands nervously in her lap. In attempt to reassure the girl, Naruto gave her a kind smile. Whatever you need help with, just tell me and I shall do my utmost to help you out. Really? Musubi looked at him and smiled. In that case, I was hoping I could stay here with you. You see, I don't have any place to stay, so I was hoping you would let me at least stay the night. Of course I'll let you stay with me, Naruto said with a smile. He didn't fully understand why he was willing to help this girl out so much. Well, that might not be 100% true, he thought to himself. The blonde knew he had a Superman complex the size of Asia. He rarely ever refused help to someone, and the few times he did were only because those people had malignant auras around them. This girl had the purest one he had ever seen. Could that be why? Or is there something more to my desire to help her? Then he blinked as he remembered something. Though I only rented this hotel room out for one night, so unfortunately we're going to need to find a more permanent place of residence. But once we find a place to live, you can stay with me as long as you want. If Naruto were honest with himself, he would admit to being lonely. The thought of having such a beautiful and kind, if a bit naive, girl spending time with him was nice. Thank you so much, Naruto. You've saved me once again, Musubi said with a smile. Naruto chuckled a little. Think nothing of it. Though that does remind me, why were those girls? He trailed off as Musubi got on her hands and knees and crawled over to him. His eyes found themselves focusing first on her face, a stunning and expressive face that held a look of such innocence it only added to her already attractive features. Then they slid down to her, large and dangling, which Naruto was sure were quite possible larger than Tsunade's. Finally, his eyes slid down her back, to the shapely rear and the mile-long legs attached to it. He hadn't met a girl this attractive in a very long time. Dear Kami, I really am a pervert. Ero Sennin did say the way of the perv would eventually be too strong to resist, and I guess he was right. I wonder if this is a result of having continued his legacy as a means of providing extra cash. His eyes moved back to Musubi's face, which had closed the distance towards him with a light blush staining her cheeks. You're such a wonderful person. You're so kind and giving, she said in a voice that could only be described as awe. I wonder if you'd still be saying that if you knew that my hands are stained in so much blood I can no longer see them, Naruto thought to himself. It was a depressing thought, and one he didn't want to contemplate. I just wish someone like you could be my Ashikabi. Naruto blinked at the phrase. It sounded like a title, but he had never heard it before. What's an Ashikabi? The special person I'm supposed to find, Musubi said. She took one of his hands in both of her own, with Naruto letting her, having not sensed any ill intent and curious to know what she was talking about. I've been looking for mine for so long. Even though we've never met, our Ashikabi is the one we are meant to serve. It's our job to guide them to the higher sky above. As she said this, Musubi placed his hand on her chest. Naruto was about to crack a joke at propriety, even though he was almost sure this girl was too naive to understand, when they both felt something hit them. What is this? Naruto asked himself as his eyes widened. I feel warm, secure, almost. I haven't felt like this since. He shook his head and pulled his hand off of her. Breathing heavily, he stood up and shook his head, attempting to dispel the feeling. It was like her chakra had overlapped mine with positive emotions and intent. I've never felt something like that, ever. Anyways, since you're done with breakfast, why don't you go and get washed up? This place unfortunately doesn't have a bath, but it does have a shower. Then get dressed and meet me in the kitchen, okay? Okay, Musubi said cheerfully as she ran into the bathroom. However, despite her cheerful demeanor, she was wondering about the same thing he was. What was that heat I was feeling in my chest just now? Naruto and Musubi found themselves walking along the road as they searched for a place to live. It was very difficult, as the blonde had just found out that the banking company he used in this particular city had been bought out by MBI, and as he had no desire to expose himself to such a large company, he would have to take more precautions when going to extract his money. This created a problem with the fact that unless he had a source of income and enough cash on hand to make a down payment, no one was willing to give them a place to live. This issue was compounded with the fact that Naruto didn't have a job. Technically, he was a writer, having decided to continue his godfather's legacy. But because he used a pen name, and refused to let others know who the real author was, it would have caused problems since his books have been around for several millennia. He was unable to say he held a job. Naruto sighed as he and Musubi walked out of another place that had refused to grant him an apartment due to his lack of a job. Sorry it's taking so long to find a place, Musubi-chan. There's no need to apologize, Musubi said with a smile. If anything, I'm grateful to you for being with me and being willing to help me. I've spent all my time alone, trying to find my Akashabi that I haven't gotten to speak with too many people. In that case, I'm glad you're here as well, Naruto grinned at the girl. I've been alone for quite a while too, so having someone keep me company is nice. Especially when it's such a beautiful girl that I'm finding myself with. Do you really think I'm beautiful? Asked Musubi, pressing her hands to her cheeks as she smiled at him. It was a much different reaction than what he was used to. Most girls blushed. Musubi was just happy to receive a compliment. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't think it, Naruto replied with a shrug. They walked along for a few more seconds before Musubi grabbed his shirt to stop him. She pressed herself against him and the blonde could feel her assets pushing themselves into his chest. Had he been a less experienced man, he would have gulped. Naruto-sama. He looked down at the girl and felt his hands begin to circle around her waist. Despite having just met her, the blonde wasn't gay, and having someone like Musubi pressing themselves into his side was having an effect that he couldn't help but respond to. Yes. Musubi looked up at him, her eyes once again wide and watery as she looked at him. I'm really hungry again. XOX. It was an hour later that despairing Naruto and a happy Musubi exited a small restaurant. After having nearly face-faulted, something he would have done were it not for the fact that the brunette had still been in his arms at the time, he had taken her out to get something to eat. Ah, that was delicious, Musubi said with a content and happy sigh. I'm glad you liked it, Naruto sniffed, anime tears pouring down his eyes as he held his now nearly empty wallet. I also hope that will keep you full for a good long while because I don't think I can pay for another eat-a-thon like that unless I can find that god-forsaken bank, he said to himself. He had always considered himself a healthy eater with a larger than normal appetite. However, this girl put him to shame, having eaten 10 entrees, 2 main courses, and a side of dessert. She could easily out-eat an okomaiki with her appetite. And yet she doesn't have their girth. I wonder where she puts it all. He cast an inconspicuous glance at the girls, which jiggled each time she made even the slightest movements. They were looking a tad larger than before she ate. Naruto-sama, since you took me out to lunch and made me breakfast, why don't you allow me to make you dinner tonight? Said Musubi, snapping the blonde out of his thoughts. He looked over at her with a curious glance. Dinner. Yeah, it will be great. I promise. She pumped her fists in the air. I would love that, thank you, Naruto said. He couldn't help but smile at her childlike enthusiasm. It kind of reminded him of Rock Lee, without the creepy eyebrows and youth fetish. There was also the fact that Musubi was extremely hot, but that was so obvious the blonde simply felt it was not worth mentioning, even in his mind. But before we do that, I'm going to need to get some cash at the bank. Why don't you head over to the grocery store and I'll meet you there? The last thing he needed was someone who might recognize Musubi and report her to Hiroto. While he still did not know what was going on, or why those lightning users were chasing her, Naruto felt being cautious might be best. After all, MBI practically owned the city, and there had always been rumors of large companies committing experiments on people in order to gain super soldiers. If those women do belong to MBI, then prudence was definitely warranted in this instance. Okay. Naruto watched as Musubi ran off and quickly moved in the opposite direction. It took a bit of asking around, but eventually he found the bank he had been looking for, making him curse since after hearing the directions realized he had passed it at least twice yesterday. Still, had he found the bank the other day he might not have met that interesting girl, and while he wasn't sure he had any plans on staying with her since he didn't want to grow attached, he couldn't deny that in the short time since they met she had made his life interesting. He took a sharp turn down an abandoned alley. After making sure he was alone, the blonde brought his hands into a hand sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he muttered. There was a puff of smoke and when it cleared, 2 Narutos could be seen standing in pace of 1. The copy that the original had just created made another hand sign and disappeared in a puff of smoke. When that cleared, the person standing before Naruto was a beautiful female with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a figure similar to Musubi's. Here, Naruto said, handing his female counterpart a fake ID with her face and the name Yamanaka Ino on it. Go in and get several thousand yen at least, that should be enough to tide Musubi and myself over. Got it, boss, Naruto said in a heavenly female voice the blonde had fashioned for his female self when he made the jutsu. As the female version of himself took off, Naruto sighed. Even after so long hearing the female version of myself call me boss, it's still a little creepy. His attention was snapped from his thoughts of his clone when the sound of explosions rocked the area. Rushing outside of his alley, Naruto's eyes narrowed when he saw Musubi running away from those lightning users. This time they were wearing maid outfits. The blonde had to shake his head at that. He truly had to wonder if he hadn't somehow stepped into some kind of manga or something. He didn't know why she was over in this area, unless she had been looking for him, nor how those 2 girls found his new friend. But he knew that he had to do something. Tensing his muscles, Naruto pushed off the ground. The cement under him caved, forming a small imprint of his foot as he left the spot. Speeding towards the 2 lightning users who were doing their utmost to fry Musubi with blast of electricity. Konoha Senpuu, Naruto shouted as he spun his body around in a 180-degree rotation. His left foot lashed out, catching one of the lightning users in the head with a roundhouse kick. The woman let out a shout as she was sent sprawling to the ground. What the? The other one shouted before Naruto smashed twin palms into her stomach. The woman let out a gasp of pain as she was sent flying backwards, landing on her flat on her back hard enough to knock the wind out of her. Using the pair's downed state as a distraction, Naruto rushed over to Musubi, scooped her into his arms, and took off at great speeds. Damn him. The woman that had gotten kicked in the head shouted. That really hurt. Just who the hell does that guy think he is? He's not a Sekirei, I can tell that much, the other one said when she finally managed to catch her breath. She looked over at where the blonde had taken off too, her eyes narrowing. However, no human should be capable of reaching those speeds. The girl holding her sore face just grunted. Whatever, let's just find them before that girl claims him as her ashikabi. I need to teach that fool a lesson for kicking me. XOX. What's happening to me? Musubi looked up at Naruto as he carried her in his arms, running and dodging all the attempts the two lightning users made to hit them. This feeling. I feel so hot. My body feels like it's on fire. Are you alright, Musubi? Asked Naruto, his eyes flicking over to her. Seeing those blue orbs looking at her in concern caused even more heat to burst from her chest. So much so that she couldn't even answer Naruto, who swore when one of the lightning blasts came close to hitting them. Damn it. I need to find a way to lose them, Naruto growled as he looked behind him to see the two still after him. I'm impressed they can keep up with me at this speed. I wonder if they're channeling lightning through their body to do it. He quickly shook his head. Now's not the time to be thinking of new theories on the two chicks with strange powers. I need to lose them, but I can't use any more speed in public. As it is, I'm already pushing the boundaries of human capabilities. Then again, those two broke them with their strange light show, so I guess it doesn't matter. Naruto closed his eyes and reached into the wellspring of energy inside of his body. Feeling his chakra respond to his calling like an old friend, the whiskered blonde began manipulating it, channeling it through his legs to strengthen them, and also to the bottom of his feet to increase his speed. The ground under him cracked as Naruto shot off like a human missile, leaving the two lightning users behind in the dust. Naruto-sama, Musubi mumbled, causing the blonde to look down as he continued his running. The girl's face was beet red and she was breathing much more heavily than she should be. Naruto's concern for her began to skyrocket as he couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. Shit. Are you alright? You look like you're burning up. I feel so hot, Musubi said, her breathing going heavy as she looked at him through half-lidded eyes. She could feel her body responding to the blonde in her arms. He was making her feel such heat, yet she didn't know why. Right. Let's find some place where you can rest for now. Looking around, Naruto made a quick detour into an alleyway. He knelt down and set Musubi on the ground. He frowned as he looked her over, pressing a hand to her forehead and eliciting a startled gasp from her. How odd. While she's burning up, I can tell she not sick. But then the question remains, why is she so? The blonde blinked when a honey-like scent hit his nostrils. He would admit that it had been a while since he had been in the company of anyone for more than an hour to two, much less a woman's. But there was no way he could not recognize the particular scent she was emitting. Is she aroused? Now that he got a closer look at her, Naruto could see the obvious signs of a woman who was turned on. The half-lidded eyes, the flushed cheeks, the way she was heaving for breath and the smell of her juices. All were obvious signs of a female who was highly aroused. Though he had never seen anyone so severely aroused it actually hampered their ability to function, Musubi looked almost like she was going into heat. Naruto-sama. Musubi fell into him, knocking the blonde over and crawled on top of him until she was straddling his waist. Please. Help me. I feel so hot. My body feels like it's burning. I've never felt this way before. Does that mean she's a virgin? Wondered Naruto, looking at the girl whose face was making a slow pace towards his. Or is something else going on? Because I know this is not normal. All thoughts fled Naruto's mind when Musubi placed her mouth over his. He was surprised, but his hesitation only lasted for an instant before he began kissing back. It had not been so long since he had been with a woman that he didn't know what to do in this kind of situation. He applied more pressure against Musubi's soft and warm lips. His hands moved from behind him and holding him up to her waist. He fell onto his back, taking Musubi with him as they continued to kiss. He felt her chakra flare and almost pulled back with a start when it latched onto his own signature. The only reason he didn't was because of his gut instincts telling him not to. Whatever was happening, Naruto could feel it wasn't hurting him in any way and was even helping him a little. The blonde could actually feel his chakra getting just a little more powerful as a two-way link seemed to open up between him and Musubi. Perhaps more powerful wasn't quite the word. It felt more like his chakra was becoming more than what it was. There was really no other way to describe it. The feeling was something more all-encompassing and deep than mere words could truly describe. Musubi began glowing a light purple, the chakra forming around her in prism-like rays of light. A symbol appeared on her back and began to project itself outwards in a physical manifestation of energy. The symbol was of a bird with a yin and yang circle under it and two tomos on either side, making that 4 total. With the yin and yang crest they formed a U with the tomos under the bird. From the projected symbol 10 wings spread out from her back. The light soon began to fade, the wings disappeared, the symbol made from energy vanished, and all that was left were Naruto and Musubi, still kissing in the alley. When they broke the kiss, Musubi's and Naruto's eyes fluttered open and they stared at each other. Naruto's left hand came over and cupped the brunette's face, causing the girl to instinctively lean into his touch. What just happened? Asked Naruto, confused. He had never felt something like this, a connection so profound he could actually feel Musubi in an almost spiritual sense. Musubi closed her eyes as she smiled at him in an expression that radiated sheer joy, the kind of which Naruto had never seen on another person before. It made his heart actually begin beating that much faster. You've just become my Ashikabi-sama. XOX. I can't believe we lost them, one of the girls huffed. The two of them were currently on their knees as they tried to regain their breath. Both had continued chasing after the strange human that had somehow just blasted away from them faster than either of them had ever thought possible. Both had been stunned by the mon's speed, but not enough to give up the chase. It was fortuitous for them that the man had left a trail in the form of foot indentations on the concrete. They had been able to follow that, only to reach an empty alleyway where the trail ended. Shut up, Hikari, the other one said. I just want to know how a mere human can move so fast. Who cares? Growled Hikari, finally regaining her breath. Now that we've lost her again, who knows how long it will take us to find her. It wouldn't matter even if you two did find her, a voice said behind them. Both of the female Sekirei whirled around to find themselves staring at a masked man with shock white hair and outfitted with a black coat and face mask. Homura, Hikari growled. What do you want? I just thought it would be a good idea to inform you that the girl now has an Ashikabi. Then, that boy winged her. Hikari said. Damn it. And you were watching us the whole time, weren't you? It is my job to be the guardian for unwinged Sekirei, Homura said. You should know that by now. Perhaps I should teach you two a lesson. If it's a fight you're looking for, Homura, then I'll give it to you. The twin with the larger bust size shouted. Are you mad, Hibiki? Hissed Hikari as she grabbed her sister's arm. Do you remember what happened the last time we fought him? Despite herself, Hibiki gulped as flames encased the white-haired Sekirei's hand. You're lucky that girl found her Ashikabi, as I have no interest in fights between winged Sekirei. So I'll let you off, for now, Homura said as the flames dispersed and he began walking away. The two twins looked at each other as the white-haired male left, both giving an internal sigh of relief. XOX. Later that night, Naruto found himself sitting at a small table in the same hotel room as before, since they had been unable to find an apartment with all the excitement that had happened today. As he sat there, the blonde took his time admiring Musubi as she cooked food wearing nothing more than a pair of panties and one of his shirts. This was due to the fact that her clothing had been ruined during the girl's flight from the two lightning users before he had gotten to her. Not that he could find it in himself to complain. It had been a while since he had such a beautiful female in his presence in such a way. Musubi, on the other hand, was humming a happy tune, pleased to know that she had finally found her Ashikabi, and such an amazing one at that. She couldn't help but think of how lucky she was. The blonde was so kind-hearted and strong. He had even protected her from those two other Sekirei, though she had no idea how he had been able to run so fast. Smiling at where her thoughts were taking her, the brunette looked down at the food she was preparing. Dinner will be ready in just a little while, she informed Naruto before going back to her cooking. Alright, Naruto said, thank you for doing this by the way. Oh, don't worry about it, Naruto-sama. Musubi looked over her shoulder and smiled at him. You're my ashikabi. I'm more than happy to do this for you. As she went back to her cooking, Naruto frowned. I'm still not even 100% sure what this whole Sekirei, ashikabi business is. From what I've seen, they have abilities above that of what humans have nowadays. While I've only met 3 so far, none of them seem capable of defeating any of the stronger ninja in my day. He looked at Musubi and smiled. Granted, she has potential. Her reserves on par with that of an average jonin. With a little training she could be very strong. Just then Naruto's cell phone began ringing. Pulling out his phone, one of the few touch screens that had been recently released to the market, he flipped it open and pressed the accept call button. The screen blanked before the image of Monako appeared on it. Before the whiskered blonde even had a chance to ask the man how the hell he received this number, the president of MBI spoke up. Congratulations, young man, you've just become the ashikabi for a Sekirei. How the hell did you manage to get this number? Asked Naruto, interrupting whatever the man was about to say. Oh, getting a number is rather easy for someone like me to do, Naruto-kun, Hanako said with a smile. Naruto narrowed his eyes with a look that could kill. However, the man appeared undeterred by the look as he continued. I will admit, you are a very hard man to get a hold of. The number of times my line was rerouted to a different phone was quite impressive, and the fact that there is very little information on you is even more so. Though, I will admit to knowing a bit more about you than most. Namikaze Minato. Naruto kept his poker face up, but on the inside his mind was a hurricane of activity. Minato was the ID I used last century when I was in England. But I barely even used it, and even then it was only in the smaller cities that I stopped by during my travels. How could he know that? He didn't question the man, and wouldn't have been able to anyways, as Musubi saw him on his phone and walked over to peer at it from over his shoulder so she could see who he was talking to. Professor, she said in surprise. Well, hello, number 88. How are you doing? Musubi gave a brilliant smile. I'm fine, Professor. I take it you two know each other, said Naruto, baiting for information. Oh yes, the professor was my professor before I began searching for you, Musubi informed him. I see, Naruto said with a frown. The thought of Musubi being looked over by this guy made him ill. Even though they were talking through a phone, he was getting bad vibes from this guy. That the man seemed to be constantly holding a smug look also didn't help. So was you congratulating me the only reason you called? Or was there another one? Of course there was another reason, the man said. Now that you're an ashikabi, you have become part of a grand game. An epic competition and struggle between Sekirei who must battle in secret in order to stay with their ashikabi. Do you understand this? I understand that you're some kind of sick and twisted who's using people like Musubi-chan for their own amusement, Naruto said with a growl. Now, there's no need for such harsh words, my boy, said Hanako. After all, insulting me won't do you any good. Now that you are an ashikabi, the game for you has begun. What if I don't want to play? Hanako smiled. Then I'm afraid I'll have to send the MBI's disciplinary squad after you. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man who seemed to find some form of amusement in the blonde's disgust. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time I have for you today. I do hope you'll play. I am looking most forward to seeing how you do. Oh, and by the way, this is a highly confidential project, so keep your mouth shut, or else. The screen went blank and Naruto growled before pocketing it. Are you okay, Naruto-sama? Asked Musubi, growing concerned when she heard him growl. Naruto looked over at the girl and felt his expression soften almost against his will. Not really, he said with a sigh. I guess I just don't like the idea of you risking your life for the whims of someone else. So, you're worried about me? She asked, almost seeming shy. Of course I am, Naruto said, looking at her with an intensity that made Musubi's heart feel warm inside. This might sound odd, but I haven't had anybody to call a friend, or even a remote acquaintance for long time. Yet in the span of a single day, you've managed to somehow become important to me. I don't want to see you hurt. He wondered if it had something to do with the odd emotions he had been feeling. He could tell they were not coming from him, but from Musubi. Ever since he had become her Ashikabi, he had been able to feel her emotions as clearly as if they were his own. Does it have something to do with when our chakra connected? I still feel her chakra combining with my, like an odd sort of emergence. He could also feel her draining his chakra, not enough to warrant any concern. His body naturally lost more chakra in 1 hour than she had managed to drain in the last 5. If anything, it was a good thing since it meant his chakra wasn't going to waste. But he did wonder what it meant. Naruto. Musubi took one of his hands with a smile on her face. She pressed it against her, and the blonde could feel her slightly hard underneath the fabric. I'm so happy to know you care about me so much. I knew I picked right when I chose you to be my Ashikabi. Musubi. However, you don't need to worry about me, she continued with a soft smile on her face. I will fight for you, I want to fight for you. And then you and I will ascend into the higher skies above together. Naruto smiled at her. His hand moved from her to her hips, it slid around her as his other hand came over and did the same, pulling the girl into a hug. Musubi instantly returned the hug. She was immensely pleased that she and her Ashikabi already seemed so close, and she loved the heat the blonde's body seemed to radiate like a furnace. It warmed her, seeping into her very soul and comforting her in ways she had not even thought Ashikabi could do with their sekirei. It was almost like he was pouring his love into their bond, like she could actually feel him there radiating his desire to protect her. If that's the case, if you really want to fight, then I will also fight with you, Naruto said. Just as you fight for me, I will also fight for you as well. You don't have to, Musubi said. I can fight for the both of us. But I want to. Naruto pulled away from their embrace so he could look in her eyes. If we are partners, then that means we are a team. I won't let you fight alone, and I will do all in my power to protect you. Musubi's eyes got big and watery, giving her a comical appearance. You're such a great person, Naruto-sama. I don't know about being a great person, Naruto said sadly. However, I will always protect the people close to me. The sound of boiling caught the blonde's attention and he continued, saying, I think the food's getting ready. Ah, oh no, the food. Musubi shot up and ran over to the stove, causing Naruto to chuckle. If nothing else, being with Musubi would be an interesting and fun experience. XOX. Dinner was anything but a quiet affair. Musubi had created her special curry, which the blonde had to admit was good. During that time, Naruto, in an effort to learn everything he could about what he had gotten himself into, started asking Musubi all kinds of questions, which she was all too happy to answer. All sekirei have their own special abilities, Musubi said as Naruto asked her about the two they had run into. Each of us are different, with our own abilities and powers. So those two we ran into were lightning types, I guess, Naruto said with a thoughtful look. That's right, Musubi nodded her head. Sekireis like them are able to use a certain element, they're what the professor calls simple types. And I'm a fist type. So you specialize in hand-to-hand combat then? Asked Naruto. Yes. I have am stronger and have more energy than other sekirei, Musubi said. I see. And I suppose I'm right in assuming that a sekirei can't change their type. Yes, it's impossible for any sekirei to change their type. Because the type of power each of us have is a part of who we are. Naruto nodded at the explanation as dinner continued on. When they were both done, Naruto insisted on doing the washing since she cooked the meal. However, Musubi was stubborn and said that she wanted to clean the dishes for him. They had eventually settled on washing the dishes together. Naruto would clean them and Musubi would dry them. The brunette sekirei seemed to like his idea the best, claiming it would bring them closer together. It was just as they were finishing up that a knock came to the door. With a frown, Naruto walked over to the door and opened it. Standing in front of the doorway was a man in a black suit with an MBI badge on his collar. Can I help you? Asked Naruto, tensing as he prepared to possibly kill this guy. However, all the man did was hand the blonde the box he was carrying, then shut the door. I wonder what this is, the blonde said as he moved back into the room Musubi was in and set it down. Kneeling by it, Naruto opened the box and pulled out clothes. Oh, they brought me my clothes, Musubi said. Then she grabbed the hem of the shirt Naruto had given her and began lifting it off. Not that I'm complaining or anything, Naruto commented as he watched her take the shirt off. or to be more specific, watched as the skin-tight shirt she had been wearing was dragged across her, which were released with a jiggle as they came loose from the shirt. She wasn't wearing a bra, so the blonde ended up getting an eyeful of her full-figured chest, a sight that took all of his considerable will not to be thrown back with a nosebleed. But are you really this comfortable with changing in front of me? Musubi blinked at him, adopting a look of confusion that, when combined with her large chest being bared to him, added a look of innocent appeal that Naruto was sure would have killed lesser men via nosebleed. He doubted that even Jiraiya, the super pervert that he was, would be capable of surviving the look she gave him. Why would I would uncomfortable changing in front of you? She asked. You know, to keep your modesty and all that, Naruto said, wondering if she was really so naive that the idea of propensity and proper behavior among the opposite was lost on her. Most of the time when two people just meet, they don't go showing off their private appendages to others. Oh, the brunette looked genuinely surprised and Naruto had to resist face palming. I didn't realize that, so should I not change in front of you? That's up to you, Naruto admitted with a shrug. Personally, I don't care if you want to change in front of me. You're gorgeous and I'm certainly not going to deny that I love seeing you like that. However, even if you do want to expose yourself in front of me, I would appreciate it if you didn't show yourself like this to anyone else. So you like seeing me like this? Asked Musubi, an odd smile on her face. It was decidedly innocent, with no connotations to it, yet radiated an expression of pure joy that actually took Naruto by surprise. I would be a fool not to, Naruto said. As I told you before, you're a beautiful woman. Naruto-sama, Musubi shouted as she lunged at him, wrapping her arms around the blonde in a hug as she tackled him to the floor. I'm so happy that you like the way I look. You don't have to worry, however, if Naruto-sama wants it, I will only show myself like this to him. Naruto groaned as he felt himself responding to Musubi's bare-chested frame pressing itself against him. He could feel all of the blood rushing to his lower head. Musubi, he said, trying to keep the growl out of his voice. If you keep this up, I'm afraid I'm going to lose control of myself. Musubi blinked as sat up and looked at him, tilting her head to the side in an expression of confusion. Lose control of yourself. You don't understand what I mean by that, do you? He asked, getting her to shake her head no. Naruto sighed. It's a figure of speech. It essentially means I'll start thinking with my second head. Second head. You have two heads. How come I can only see one? Musubi asked as she began to look at his body to see where his second head was. Naruto groaned as he realized that Musubi didn't seem to understand any terms, meaning it was unlikely she even knew what was. He was not looking forward to that conversation. Never mind, he said quickly. In the hopes she would drop the subject, he changed topics, so why don't you finish getting changed so we can go to bed? Musubi smiled as she began getting changed into a large shirt that he got out for her to sleep in. Okay. He was battling. A horde of endless enemies were charging towards him. Their bodies were pure white. On occasion they would look like others, however, allies. But this did not stop him as he cut through the mass of swarming enemies like a hot knife through butter. He knew they weren't truly his allies, he could sense the dark intentions they held. Beside him was another man, an ally, though he couldn't remember his name. He was a man with dark skin and a muscular build, as well as white hair and a goatee. On his right shoulder, he had a tattoo of the kanji for iron, G, Tetsu, and on his left cheek, there was a tattoo of a bull's horn. His top lip also has a slightly darker hue than his bottom one. Like him, this man was plowing his way through the enemy horde like there was no tomorrow. The battle was beginning to pick up, there were more people joining in. Not just the white guys who could change shape. A raven-haired man with red eyes and 3 Toma was launching fireballs at him. Meanwhile, another man with a drawn-back face and light purple eyes with a ripple pattern summoned a large dog. Even more men were coming, and if he didn't act so he knew he would be overwhelmed. His hands moved in a blur before he shot out several bullets of wind that sailed into the white guys. The wind was so compressed the attack blew holes straight through the men. Out of pure instinct he rolled forward, dodging the dog that attacked him. Pushing off the ground with his hand he spun around and landed on the ground several feet away. Another hand seal later and several copies of himself appeared within a cloud of smoke. They launched themselves at the dog with a vengeance. Several were wiped out by its huge claws, but a few managed to make it through. As soon as they landed on the dog, they exploded, causing it to multiply but also lose its size. The man with the ripple eyes who had been standing on the dog was forced to jump off. He met the man in the air and launched a powerful strike that was blocked by a forearm. However, the blow was more than enough to send the man crashing down to earth. Landing, he had just enough time to dodge a fire dragon from the raven-haired man with the red eyes. He glared as a hand launched itself from his cloak, a spinning ball of chakra inside of it, and attacked the man who proceeded to dodge. However, the hand was just a distraction as numerous more cropped up and surrounding him. Just as he was about to crush the man, a shout of Shinra Tennis was heard before he was sent sailing backwards, crashing into and breaking through a large boulder. The battle soon began to take a turn for the worst as he and his ally tried to fend them off. However, with the endless horde of white men and the new, more skilled people being added to the equation, the two were soon overwhelmed. Even still, he continued to fight and struggle as he was soon pinned down. It was then that another appeared on the battlefield, laughing at him. He. Looks like my plans will soon be complete. I have to thank you for making it easier," said a man with a face mask that had a design on it that looked like a combination between the eyes of the two he had been fighting. "I must thank you for being so foolish as to come onto the battlefield." Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Naruto awoke with a loud gasp as he shot up into a sitting position. He looked around the room, noticing the plain white walls of the guest bedroom to the small apartment he lived in. Bringing up a hand, he wiped away some of the sweat on his face. A sigh escaped his lips as he lay back down and closed his eyes. "Are your memories acting up again?" Blinking, Naruto turned his head towards the sound of the voice. It was a girl around his age, with white hair and a body that brought new meaning to the words, "If looks could kill." She was currently dressed in a modified school uniform, one that Naruto loved as the skirt stopped above her mid-thigh, allowing him to see more of her long, pale legs. Her eyes were currently closed, which was pretty much the standard with her. "Are you done stripping me with your eyes, Naruto-kun?" asked the girl with a slightly amused smile. "No, not really," Naruto answered with a grin. "Unfortunately, there isn't enough time in the day for me to properly admire your beauty, Yun-chan." Shuin resisted the odd urge to giggle, something only this particular blonde could ever make her do. "Hurry up and get dressed. We need to head over to Sato soon," she said before turning to leave. Naruto groaned. "Great, Sato Academy, why do I have to go to school anyways?" Sighing, the blonde stood up and began his day. Stupid, boring school. After taking a long rinse in the shower to get the sweat that had accumulated due to his nightmare off his body, Naruto got dressed in his own uniform. Like Shuin, he had modified it quite a bit more than what she had done to hers. He had a pair of black slacks that had an orange flame pattern on the bottom, a white sleeveless shirt with orange stripes, and a pair of orange fingerless gloves. The only other accessories he had were three: a headband with a leaf symbol on it, a necklace with a green gem on it, and another necklace with 6 glowing red magatama. Aside from a pair of tattered clothes, they were the only things he had on him when he had been found. He looked himself over in the mirror as he dressed. Naruto had spiky blonde hair, and not your average blonde either. Shuin had described his hair once, saying, "It's like staring at the sun. If you look too much, it might blind you." It was an odd golden blonde color that seemed to literally absorb and reflect sunlight. It had a fringe in the front that overshadowed his eyes and 2 jaw-length bangs. Naruto was fairly tall for his age, standing at around 6 feet even. Like most fighters, his body was layered with hard muscles that he gained from hours of strenuous training and combat. Unlike most men, however, his were not the bulky kind that only weighed people down. They were compact, streamlined if he wanted to listen to Shuin, and were built for speed above all else. However, the oddest thing about Naruto was his eyes. His eyes consisted of a light gray iris and sclera with 4 concentric rings spreading out from the pupil. They were something of a secret to him. Only Shuin and a few others had ever seen his eyes. The only other defining feature about him were the 6 whisker marks on his face, 3 on each cheek running horizontally across his face. Taking a pair of sunglasses from the stand in his room, Naruto put them over his eyes, finishing up his outfit. Grinning, he made his way downstairs and into the kitchen, where Shuin was cooking breakfast. "You know, Naruto-kun, it takes you a long time to get ready. I don't know any other male that takes as long as you just to get dressed, she told him in a laid-back tone that held a slightly teasing quality. In fact, I think it takes longer for you to get ready than most women I know. Haha. Very funny, Naruto laughed sarcastically. And you're the only girl I know who likes to sit on the dryer while it's running. I like the funny feeling it makes between my crotch, she replied, stepping into the landmine he had planted on purpose. The two looked at each other, then Naruto chuckled, with Shuin following moments later. Soon both of them were laughing as Shuin set 2 plates on the table. Naruto helped her by bringing in the large tray of pancakes, setting them down onto the table before dishing up his friend and sitting down himself. Helping himself, Naruto's plate was soon piled high with food which he immediately took to scarfing down in the same minute it took for Shuin to finish a single pancake. Honestly, I don't know how you can eat so much and not gain any weight, she said with what sounded like a jealous tone, though it was often hard to tell with her. Even I would gain weight if I ate like you. I think anyone else would too, Naruto said as he finished the last of his food and began to gently sip some tea. And it's not like it's my fault I have an awesome metabolism, blame genetics. Oh, so it's genes now this time? Asked Shuin, her voice teasing. That's my story and I'm sticking to it, the blonde replied. Shuin giggled a bit before cutting herself off abruptly. She noticed Naruto giving her a knowing grin and was almost tempted to pout at actually getting caught giggling like some average school girl. Almost. Come, she said as she stood up and put her dishes in the sink. We need to get going or we'll be late to school. School. He noticed the look she was giving him. It was the, if you don't do as I ask, I'm going to kick your, look that all women seem to have perfected at some point during their life. Fine, I'm coming. No need to get your panties in a twist. He paused, as if just registering what he said for the first time. A few seconds later a grin formed on his face and he added, unless you want me to help untwist them, then go ahead and get them as twisted as you'd like. Ikki Tusen. Mo, you didn't have to hit me so hard, did you? Asked Naruto as he and Shuin walked to school. Currently, he was rubbing a large bump on his head from his roommate smashing the sheath of her blade on it. That really hurt, you know. You deserved it. Mentioning my panties like that, his partner said with a small smile. I mention those all the time. Hell, I've washed your panties and you didn't care then, the blonde said in his defense. He perked up a moment later, however, and grabbed his white-haired friend's hand, lacing their fingers together as his thumb rubbed against the back of her hand. The silver-haired woman was fairly used to this by now. She had learned early on in their friendship that Naruto seemed to thrive on physical contact with others. She didn't know what it meant, though she assumed he was neglected as a child and it had been so bad his desire for human contact was some form of instinct. You have helped me wash my clothes a few times, she said, making sure to lace her fingers with his. Whatever the case was, she rather liked the blonde, so returning his Jesutray wasn't all that hard. But I don't recall you touching my panties. You don't. Naruto scratched his chin as he looked up at the sky. Well, maybe you weren't there at the time, but I had felt that I should help out around the house, so after I washed my own clothes I did your too. And you just happened to find a pair of my panties in them? Questioned Shuin with a raised eyebrow. Of course not, Naruto said, it was when I was hanging your clothes up to dry. I could even name your bra and waist size. Shuin just shook her head and smiled at his slightly perverted antics. The blonde always seemed to bounce between certain emotions dramatically, like he was acting on a stage. It made for an interesting show, if nothing else. So are you excited for your first day of school? Asked Shuin as they walked hand in hand down the street. Their presence seemed to attract some attention, mostly from the guys who were staring at Shuin's legs and large chest, or the girls who were quite literally drooling over Naruto. She found this part the most amusing, though she had to admit her blonde friend was definitely the most handsome man she had ever met. She couldn't rightly blame them for their lustful looks. School. Naruto groaned once more and again Shuin had to squash the urge to giggle at the boy. She blamed it on the whiskers, adding to his cuteness factor. I still don't know why you're making me go to school. It's not like I'll learn anything useful, and school sounds so boring. The blonde raised his fist in the air. The last thing I want to do is get stuck sitting in a chair listening to boring lectures. But it may help you get your memories back, Shuin commented lightly. It could help by making you remember a time when you were in school. I guess, Naruto mumbled. Personally, he didn't believe her. How could sitting in a chair listening to some teacher drone on and on about garbage few people would ever use help him regain his memories? Not that he would tell her that, still doesn't seem like a good reason. Shuin just shook her head at her blonde friend. She had only known him for a month, but in that time there were a few things she had learned. One of them was his absolute hatred for school. The swordswoman didn't know if it had something to do with his past, or if the thought of sitting in a classroom was just that unappealing to him. Whatever the case may be, Uzumaki Naruto hated it when she even mentioned school or any kind of academic learning. The blonde was able to better learn by doing hands-on work. As they entered the gate and continued on their way, the pair ran into a girl with blue eyes and purple hair. She was wearing a variation of a school's uniform, where her shirt only extends to her midriff section, and had on a pair of baggy socks. Kon-chan. Naruto shouted as he rushed over to her, his arms wide open as if to embrace her. Only for Kanu to swing her blue dragon crescent blade at him, it looked like she was trying to bisect him. However, the blade merely passed through an afterimage and Kanu Onsho suddenly found a pair of arms wrapped around her waist, a set of well muscles, abs and chest pressed against her back, and Naruto's left cheek nuzzling against her. I missed you so much, Kon-chan. Naruto baka. Get off. Kanu grunted as she tried her best to get the blonde to let go by elbowing him in the ribs. He jumped back before she could, however that was all she needed to spin around and swing her blade at him. Once again all she did was pass through an afterimage. Why are you so mean, Kon-chan? Asked Naruto with a pout, reappearing on her left. I thought you loved me. Kanu Onsho grinded her teeth together. We've only met once, 2 weeks ago, and that one time all you did was annoy me. Why would I love you? I don't know what you're getting so worked up over. Naruto defended himself. All I did was tell you that such a beautiful woman shouldn't act so manly. Kanu made to swing at him again, but the blonde immediately moved to the opposite side of Shuin, who merely looked amused by the pair's antics. The moment Naruto and Unsho Kanu had met, the purple-haired beauty had grown a fierce dislike of the blonde. I hate you, Kanu said through grit teeth. What? Wailed Naruto, looking as if the world had just come to an end at her words. How could you possibly hate me? He looked at Shuin with crocodile tears in his eyes. You love me, don't you, Yun-chan? You don't hate me, right? Of course I love you, Naruto-kun, she replied in a manner that made it hard to tell if she was humoring him or not. She gave him a pat on the cheek like he was a little kid. How could I possibly hate such a good-looking and sweet guy? Yes. Naruto pumped a fist into the air, his previous sadness seemingly forgotten. I don't know why you humor him so, Kanu said to the silver-haired swordswoman as the three walked to their classes. Who says I'm humoring him? Asked Shuin. I was quite serious. Besides, Naruto added from the other side of the swordswoman, sticking his head out and grinning at Kanu. Us newbies need to stick together. Shuin nodded in agreement. That's right. While Naruto was pretty much new to everything, having been found with a severe case of amnesia, Shuin had just transferred to Sato this year. So this was both their first day at Sato Private School. Kanu just sighed. You are so lucky, Ryubi-sama asked me to look after you too. Ah, Rai-chan wanted to make sure we were looked after. Naruto gushed. I should give her my special thank you. Don't you dare, Kanu said, her lance coming up again. She may have only met Naruto once, but that one time was all she needed to know what special thanks he was talking about. And she would die before she let this pervert do something like that to Ryubi. Don't worry, Kon-chan, Naruto said with a smile that was far too innocent to be real. I'll give you my special thank you as well. Die. I have no intention of dying, my sweet Tsunere. Ha ha ha. Grr. I'll kill you. As Kanu began to chase the blonde around Shuin, said girl gave a light chuckle. I have feeling this year is going to be very interesting. She looked at Naruto just as he shrieked like a girl and ducked under Kanu's blade. Yes, I'm so glad I came to this school. Ikki Tusen. Naruto kept his eyes closed as he ignored the roaring waterfall, both the sound as it drummed in his ears, along with the way the water crashed into his back as he sat under it. He ignored the biting cold and everything else as he continued his meditation. It was after school now and Naruto had decided to explore the region. He was lucky when he ran into this place. He remained perfectly still and felt out his own inner energy as he sat cross-legged, his body sitting above the water's surface as he regulated and controlled the power within him. Ever since he had woken up, Naruto had always been in touch with his own inner energy. It was not that different from his friends Shuin or Kanu, who both used what they called Kai, but at the same time their power felt incomplete. He didn't know what else to call it other than incomplete. It was like they were only using half of their available power. Thanks to his eyes, Naruto was able to see a person's inner energy, to quantify it, analyze it and break it down until he knew everything about it. He could tell how much power someone had with a single glance of his eyes. It was one of the many abilities he had thanks to them. For example, when he looked at Shuin, her energy, like most people in this world, was a light blue, with only a small difference being that she had a light yellow tinging the color. However, when she channeled her Kai, the only color that came out was green, like half the color had been taken out of it. Along with his own controlled energy, Naruto felt two other types of energy. The first was the energy field that surrounded him, the energy of a nature, a light green that moved through the land like a light mist. The second energy was inside of him. It was a dark reddish orange and spoke of malevolent intent and the desire to cause destruction, though it was restrained, tame. He had no clue how it got there or what it was, even after hours of meditation, but figured he would figure it out with time. Naruto had no clue how long he stayed under the waterfall, but eventually the sun began to set and he realized he had stayed out for far too late. Oh shit! He yelled as he hurried to stand up and run on top of the water towards the edge where his shirt and coat were folded on the ground. A quick application of fire chakra to heat his body up and he was nice and dry. He grabbed his discarded clothes and began putting them on as he ran out of the small clearing. Hopefully he could find this place again later. He never noticed the set of eyes watching him as he ran off. Was that guy walking on water? Who was that? He began pumping chakra to his legs as he found himself on a street. It was tempting to just teleport home, but he knew that he was already pushing the limits of what a human could do. That Shuin had told him not to show any of his special abilities if he could help it. Oh man, Yun-chan's gonna kill me if I'm late for dinner. He really shouldn't have gone exploring on his own. Well, he didn't think there was really anything wrong with that. However, the moment he had seen that beautiful clearing, he should have just marked it as a place to go back to later and left. Now he was late. He soon found himself running through a small park but was stopped by 10 people wearing school uniforms that differed from his own. Well, boys, looks like one of Sato's students has come onto our turf. So, you're the new guy we've been hearing rumors about, huh? Said the man in the front of the group. You don't look like much, and here I was thinking I had finally found someone who might actually be a challenge. Huh, you know of me? Asked Naruto. He shook his head. Look, I don't know who you people are, but I'm in something of a hurry here. So, why don't losers just run along before I break my foot off in your, okay? What was that, you punk? Shouted the man, rushing him with a fist back. However, by that time Naruto had already gone, and all that he went through was an afterimage. What the? The man was cut off mid-speech as Naruto's image appeared in front of him, crouched down on the ground with one hand planted behind him. He used his position to launch a brutal kick under the man's chin, launching him into the air where he moved in a slow arch before hitting the ground 2 meters away. The other Tushi didn't seem to take too well to this. Did you see that? That bastard. Let's get him. All of the men rushed him and Naruto frowned for only a moment before a grin came to his face. The men were soon at his position, doing their best to land a hit on him. However, the blonde just wove between their attacks with ease. Nothing they did seemed to work as Naruto would dodge and spin around their attacks as if he knew they were coming before they came. This is too easy. Naruto as he dodged one attack after another. I hope this isn't the best you guys have. Grr. Hold still, you little shit. Yelled one of the men, throwing another punch at the blonde. Naruto smirked. All right. He let the attack come in, but before it even hit him he had grabbed the hand. Yanking on it he sent the Tushi he had in his grip flying towards him, where the blonde proceeded to smash his fist into the man's face, knocking him out cold and sending him flying into a metal pole that bent due to the force of the punch. Spinning on the balls of his feet, Naruto launched 2 kicks in quick succession, each one hitting one of the Tushi with enough force to send them smashing into a tree. Ducking, he dodged an attack that came from behind, putting his hands on the ground and lashing out with a mule kick. Said attack was hard enough that the sounds of ribs breaking could be heard clear throughout the small clearing. Without waiting to watch that man get sent flying, the blonde kicked himself into a handstand and spun around, doing a split and kicking two more Tushi in the face. He pushed himself into a handspring and landed on his feet a meter away. Well? He asked, looking at the remaining people who had ganged up on him. He noticed the looks of fear they had on their faces and smirked. Is that all you have? You guys just come out of the blue and attack me, yet now look at you. You're nothing but a bunch of losers cowering in fear and using your false sense of bravado as a fighter to get through the day. How pathetic. Gra, I'll show you pathetic, yelled one of the men who seemed to have more brawn than brains. Well, it's not like the rest of the fools had any more than this guy, they were just too scared to do much at the moment. Naruto watched as the guy came at him, fist pulled back in preparation for a punch, and sighed. As soon as the man came within reach, his foot struck, launching out at a speed so fast only the after effects were seen. Said effect being the man getting sent flying backwards where he smashed not into a tree, but straight through a tree. The other Tushi looked at the now broken tree wide-eyed, then turned their eyes on Naruto. Boo! Naruto said, getting a girlish scream from all of the Tushi around him before they ran like bats out of hell. Ha 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 ha. What a bunch of losers. Ha 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 ha. Oh no. Naruto's face paled and he began running again. Damn it. Damn it. Damn it. I am so late. Ikki Tusen. Yun-chan. I'm home. Naruto shouted as he closed the door behind him, took off his shoes and made his way into the living room. Uzumaki-kun. Naruto blinked in surprise before a pair of arms entangled around his neck. Out of sheer instinct he wrapped his own arms around the waist of the female holding, spinning once so he wouldn't lose his balance. He set the girl back on her feet and pushed her away to get a good look at her. The person holding him was a rather cute girl with very large, something that he felt simply didn't fit her cute personality. She had light brown hair, green eyes and glasses and was currently still in her school uniform. Rai-chan. Naruto grinned. It's been all of what, 2 weeks since we last saw each other. He playfully ruffled the girl's hair. How's my little Imouto-chan? Moo, do you have treat me like a kid Ni-san? Asked Ryubi with a slight pout. She smiled a second later as if she had already forgotten him treating her like a kid. So, did you read that book I gave you? Huh. Did you? Did you? Naruto chuckled nervously. He. Well, you see You didn't, did you? She said in an accusing tone as she placed her hands on her hips. Well, I wanted to but. You promised me you would read the book, she whined. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Yeah, but it's just so boring. How can I be expected to read when there are so many better things I could be doing? How could you say that? Ryubi placed a hand to her mouth and gasped, as if what he had just said was the most blasphemous thing she had ever heard. Books are the best way to understand the world. By reading, we can learn about both the world around us and ourselves. As Ryubi went off on her rant about the greatness of books to poor Naruto, Kanu walked into the entrance to see what was happening and palmed her face. God help me, why did these two have to hit it off so well? They do seem rather close for having met only once, Shuin admitted. They really do act like brother and sister. It's just my luck that the person I am destined to protect chose the person I hate as her older brother figure. Do you really hate him? Asked Shuin with a smile on her face. I would think that you'd be much more serious whenever you made an attempt to kill him after the times he pissed you off. He's still a student of our school, Kanu said, turning away from Shuin who just gained a wider smile. I can't just kill him. If you say so. While Kanu turned a small glare at Shuin, Naruto was still receiving a stern talking to about the greatness of books. And if you don't read you'll never learn of the mistakes of the past, and you'll be forever destined to repeat them. He absently wondered how this girl could be so long-winded about something as boring as books. Looking for a way out, Naruto's eyes landed on the two behind Ryubi and he smiled widely. Yun-chan. Kon-chan. Did you two miss me? He asked, slipping past Ryubi who spun around in an attempt to keep him in her sights but ended up tripping over her own feet and falling to the floor. Why would I miss you, Baka? Asked Kanu with a sneer. So cruel. Naruto muttered. He turned to Shuin with large, puppy dog eyes. Though with his whisker, The white-haired swordswoman thought he looked more like a fox. You missed though, didn't you, Yun-chan? Of course, his roommate replied, amused, didn't I tell you that this morning though? Yeah, but it's nice to hear it repeatedly, he said with a smile. Especially when the brutish hater over there is being mean. Kanu heard this however and glared at Naruto. What was that? 1 hour and a trashed living room later, Naruto, Shuin, Kanu and Ryubi were eating at the dinner table. Well, the three girls were eating. Naruto was more or less devouring everything on his plate. How does he eat so much? Asked Ryubi, who watched as Naruto finished inhaling another bowl of ramen. I've never seen anyone eat like this. He's like a human garbage disposal, Kanu said in disgust. It does make paying for groceries rather difficult, Shuin commented as she finished her own bowl. Thankfully he seems to be obsessed with ramen, which is cheap. Were it anything else I don't think we'd have enough money for groceries. Naruto said as he continued scarfing his food. Please don't talk with your mouth full, Naruto-kun, Shuin said. Naruto finished inhaling his 30th bowl of ramen, drinking the brother before setting it down with a sigh. Sorry, he apologized. It's fine, said Shuin. You were saying. I was saying it's rude to talk about me like I'm not even here, he said with a pout. Shuin just smiled. I apologize. Sock, he said with a smile. Well, I don't, Kanu said with a huff. You're disrespectful, rude. Ah, you don't have to say such mean things, Kon-chan, Naruto said with a pout. He smirked a few seconds later. Besides, at least I'm not boorish and unruly. Why you? Kanu stood up and grabbed her crescent blade, from where Naruto didn't know, but as soon as it was out he grinned and dodged to the left just as it came down and split the table in half. Ah, my meat buns. Ryubi cried as her food fell to the floor. As Kanu once again began chasing Naruto, Shuin gave herself a pat on the back for having the insight to take her food off the table the moment the two started talking. She opened her eyes and looked at the evenly split table. I'm gonna need to buy a new table. Ikki Tusen. He was breathing heavily as he looked over at his opponent. His entire body felt like it was on fire. The innumerable amount of cuts and bruises he had were healed for the most part, but now there was a red haze around him, swishing and twirling with a life of its own, taking on the form of a fox with one tail. On the other side, his opponent was looking just as bad as he was. With ash-gray skin, two hand-shaped wings on his back, a star-like scar across his face and black pupilless eyes with 3 tomo in them, the kid looked even more freaky than he did. Both of them knew they were nearing their limit. The battle between them had been dragged on for some time and neither really had the strength left for more fighting. This would end with the next attack. He held out his hand, channeling the red chakra towards his palm to form a sphere of swirling, destructive energy. Over on the other side, his opponent was creating his own attack, one hand pointed at the ground while the other was held to stabilize it as lightning sparked and crackled within the downturned palm. This is it, Dobi, the ash-gray kid shouted. You're right, it is, he said slowly. I'm taking you back to Konoha. I made a promise I won't go back on my word. With their attacks charged, the two shot off the ground, the earth cracking underneath them as they rocketed towards each other. They thrust their palms out and waited for the clash that would come, both knowing only one of them would be the victor. Naruto. Sasuke. Sasuke. Naruto shot up into a sitting position with a loud yell. His breathing was erratic and labored, as if he had just fought the battle within his nightmare. His eyes were wide, but unseeing. All he could see in that moment were the spinning black eyes of the kid he had fought in his dream. He couldn't fathom what he had seen. Were these really his memories? Or were they just nightmares? Just then the door burst open and Shuin came in, her sword in hand. When she saw there were no threats, the white-haired high school student looked over at her roommate. Naruto-kun, are you okay? She asked, leaning her blade against his nightstand as she sat on his bed. You're shaking, she commented as she laid a hand on his sweaty back. Am I? Naruto asked absently, blinking a few times as if just coming out of a trance. He looked over at Shuin and confusion flickered across his eyes. Yun-chan. I'm here, she said. Are you alright? Naruto didn't respond with words as he closed his eyes, just nodded his head absently as he tried to figure out what the dream meant. Hold on a moment, she told him as she stood up and walked out of the room. She went to the kitchen and opened the cabinet under the sink, pulling out a rag, then pulled out a bowl from another cabinet and filled it with water. She came back up and a second later, dumped the rag in the bowl, pulled it out and wringed it until it was just mildly wet. She then began to wipe the sweat off of Naruto's face and back, taking care of the large scar on his back that was centered just a little above where his heart would. She knew if she looked at the front there would be one matching it. Naruto sighed as he let Shuen work. When she was finished he looked at her with a smile. "Thanks, Yun-chan," he said with a whisper. "You're welcome," she replied with a smile. Standing up she went to put the bowl and rag away. She stopped at the door and turned her head to say, "Why don't you get in the shower and get ready? Do we have school today?" asked Naruto, confused because he didn't remember them having school since it was a Sunday. Shuen chuckled at him. "No, we're going out today though, remember?" Naruto just gave her a dumb look as she laughed and left the room. Ikki Tusen. Naruto and Shuen walked down the street as they made their way to the movie theater. Naruto looked around the large city, taking it in as if for the first time. He always felt slightly uneasy seeing the large buildings, like the layout wasn't supposed to be like this. Looking at the city now he would get flashes of another city, with large trees and a stone mountain with four faces on it. Shaking his head the blonde banished those thoughts for now, pushing the few flashes of memories to the back of his mind until he could sort them later. He decided to turn his attention to his roommate. "So what movie are we going to go see, Yun-chan?" "There's a new movie I wanted to see," Shuen replied with a slight smile, "an adaptation of the Three Kingdoms. That's the book you promised Ryubi-sama you would read but didn't." Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly at that while Shuen bought two tickets at the ticket booth. The two made their way inside, and after getting their stubs pulled they stood in line at the concession stand. "Do you want anything to eat?" asked Shuen as she surveyed the different types of food and candy in the concession stand. Naruto looked at the different foods as well and slowly shook his head. "Not really, but maybe we should get a Coke." "Right, I'll have one medium-sized bag of popcorn and a large Coke," Shuen ordered from the guy at the register. When their food was given to them and paid for, the duo made their way into the theater room where their movie was playing at. "Where should we sit?" asked Naruto, who was holding the drink and popcorn, having insisted that it was only proper for him to do so, being a gentleman and all. "The middle," Shuen decided as soon as he asked the question, leading the blonde to the exact center of the theater. They sat down and Naruto put the drink in the holder and the popcorn on Shuen's lap so she could eat it, and because he wasn't much of a popcorn fan. The movie started several minutes after that and the pair watched the novelization of the Three Kingdoms era of China. As the movie progressed, Naruto had to admit it was a rather interesting tale. It told a story of the historical period of disunity in China called the Six Dynasties following the loss of power of the Han Dynasty. The young blonde actually found himself rather immersed in the story as he watched the battles of the many famed warriors of that era. Men like Liu Biyu, Liu Bei, Zhao Yun, Guan Yu and many others. He could tell the story was highly romanticized. The way the battles were shown seemed far too tame for true war. An image flashed in his mind. A battle between two forces. A group of faces he recognized but couldn't recall were fighting against hordes of white zombie-looking ninja and the reanimated bodies of those who came before. One by one his friends and allies fell, unable to keep up with the zombie ninja. Naruto closed his eyes and brought a hand to his face, messaging the bridge of his nose as the memories assaulted him. He felt there was something significant about these memories, aside from the fact that so far they were some of the only ones he had. At the same time, he felt an immense feeling of sadness well up inside of him every time he saw those images. They were accompanied by a sense of loss, bitterness and regret that he didn't really want to deal with. His shift in demeanor did not go unnoticed however as Shuen looked away from the screen and at him. "Are you okay?" she asked, placing a hand on his arm and rubbing it consolingly. He smiled at her. "I'm fine, just remembering is all." She gave him a look that more or less told him that she wanted an explanation soon. "I'll tell you a little later." Shuen looked at him for a moment longer before nodding her acceptance and turning back to the movie. Naruto did as well, doing his best to banish the gruesome images of people he somehow knew instinctively were his friends dying. Ikki Tusen. "So what did you think of the movie, Naruto-kun?" asked Shuen as the two walked back to their apartment. They had just finished watching the movie a little less than an hour ago and had gone to a small restaurant to get some takeout. It was pretty good actually, Naruto said as he walked alongside the girl who had taken him in, with his hands resting behind his head as he stared up at the sky. I really enjoyed the story it told. I suppose I can see why Rai-chan wanted me to read the book, it's an interesting tale. Do you know of the significance of the Three Kingdoms period? Asked Shuin. Naruto shook his head, not beyond what I saw in the movie. Much like the strife in that period, the 7 schools of the Kanto region are in an all-out turf war. A hand went to the Magatama earrings she had on. These Magatama earrings are worn by all Tushi, and contain the essence and spirits of the warriors from the Three Kingdoms era in China. The earrings tell us who we are, and many believe that our fate is the same as the warriors our Magatama contain. You should give up, advised a boy with long brown hair and pupilless white eyes. You will not win here today, it is your fate to lose here. Naruto blinked a few times as he tilted his head to the side, looking almost like he did not understand what the white-eyed prodigy was saying. My fate. Yes, that is right. It was your fate to lose to me. The moment I was made your opponent, your fate was set. The boy said, an arrogant smirk on his face. People are only as talented as fate allows them. A person's abilities are predetermined the moment they are born into this world. Fate. Naruto shook his head of the memories her words invoked and snorted. I don't believe in fate. Shuin looked over at him, her light blue eyes opening as she saw a frown on his face. Fate, destiny, those are for the fools who are too weak to take a hold of life with their own hands, and too cowardice to take responsibility for their own actions. They blame their lack of ability and the troubles they face on fate, unwilling to even think that maybe, just maybe their problems are their own doing. They do nothing, not even bothering to truly live life, going under the misguided belief that everything is determined by fate, and no matter what happens, their life was preordained long before their birth, so they feel there is no point in even trying, because it was meant to happen anyway. The blonde shook his head, it's a load of crap, I make my own destiny. No one decides my fate but me. Naruto-kun, said Shuin, sounding a little uncertain at the way he spoke. He sounded much more mature than his usual childish and flirtatious self. She wasn't quite sure how to respond to him. However, the moment ended when he turned to her, blinked, as if seeing her for the first time. Then he laughed as a hand went to rub the back of his head and a sheepish expression crossed his face. Sorry about that. What was all that about? Asked Shuin, her curiosity piqued by his words. I think it's because of some memories, he said, frowning as he looked up at the sky. So you're beginning to remember things outside of your dreams? She asked. A little, Naruto admitted. It's not much, but I remember fighting someone. I think it was in a tournament, but I only truly remember the one part. He told me that our fates were decided since birth, that people were only as talented as fate allowed them, and a person's abilities were predetermined since birth. He shook his head and frowned. Just remembering those words piss me off. But you don't know why, she said, not as a statement but as a fact. Sighing, Naruto nodded. No, I don't. Unfortunately, all I remember is that small segment, and I feel like there is much more before that point that is important, but I can't remember any of it. Well, I'm sure you'll remember eventually, so try not to worry too much, okay? Shuin placed a hand on his shoulder in a reassuring fashion. Don't worry, I won't let it bother me, Naruto said with a smile, which soon turned into a mischievous grin. With such beautiful company, it's hard to think about anything concerning my past. Shuin just let out a soft laugh, always the smooth talker Of course, Naruto replied as the two started back on their way home. Ikki Tusen. The pair arrived home half an hour later and ate dinner in silence. Neither were bothered by this as the atmosphere was very peaceful and gave them both time to think. When they were finished, Naruto and Shuin made their way to the bathroom to get ready for bed. Due to how small the apartment was, there was only one restroom, located between the main bedroom and the guest bedroom with a door on either side leading to the two rooms. Naruto stood on his side of the sink as he brushed his teeth, with Shuin doing the same next to him. After brushing their teeth, the pair rinsed their mouth with water and spit at the same time. Looking at each other, the blonde grinned while the girl just smiled in her usual laid-back manner, though there was a touch of amusement as well. We're quite the pair, said Shuin. Yeah, I wonder what Kon-chan would say if she saw us like this, Naruto commented as he scratched his chin in thought. She would probably complain about me being too familiar with you, Shuin said. Or she would demand me to stop copying you, Naruto said with a grin. Probably. Naruto chuckled before he pulled Shuin into a hug, startling the girl since though he had flirted with her, along with Kanu, they hadn't really had this kind close physical contact besides sparring and the times she would look after him during a particularly bad nightmare. Thanks, Yun-chan, Naruto said. For what? She asked as she leaned into him. Was it just her or was Naruto just naturally this warm? For everything, I suppose, he said. For taking me in, for carrying me when I was too injured to even lift a finger, for being my friend when I had none and helping me, even though I can't really remember anything about myself. You didn't know me, and you had no reason to help me, but you did. And for that I thank you. I'm sure you would have done the same, Shuin said, feeling a little flustered. She hadn't really seen Naruto when he was serious, occasional flashes was all she got for his more serious personality, like when he woke up from the occasional nightmare memories. Seeing him like this made her heart beat much faster, though she couldn't figure out why. She had just met him a month ago, it's not like she could be falling for him after such a short time. Right, I would have. He took a step back so he could look at her with an oddly serene smile on his face. But I still appreciate what you've done for, and are still doing for me, he told her. Shuin's face gained a beet red quality as Naruto leaned down and kissed her cheek, his lips just touching on the left side of her mouth. Leaning back up he grinned at her. Night Yun-chan. Shuin watched as Naruto made his way towards his room, her hand moving up to touch the spot he had kissed, she could still feel his lips on her skin. That was nice, she admitted before shaking her head and banishing the thoughts. She took one last look at the now closed door, gaining a contemplative look on her face, then she shook her head and made her way to her own room. Ikki Tusen. I see, so there's a new student at Sato Academy, said a brown-haired young man wearing the school uniform of the Rakuyu school uniform. His arms were covered in bandages and his brown eyes held a sadistic look on his face. Yes, not much is known about him, a beautiful woman around 18 with light tan skin, green hair in two messy pigtails and green eyes said. She was wearing the female version of the Rakuyu uniform, her outfit was a lot more skimpy than most, with her rather impressive bust almost looking like it was being pushed out of her blazer. He goes by the name of Uzumaki Naruto, I'm told he's quite the cutie. So what do we know about him, Ryofu? Asked the brown-haired man. He seems to be living with another new student named Shiryu Shuin, Ryofu said. Other than that all we know is that he seems to always be wearing sunglasses that completely cover his eyes, along with that he has a necklace with 6 red magatama on it. 6. That was interesting news. What did this mean? Was it possible that he had 6 warrior spirits? And why were they red? There were many questions and it was quite possible this new student was a hindrance to his plans. I see. Find out all you can on him. If he proves to be a threat, eliminate him. If he's as cute as they say it will be a shame to kill him, Ryofu said with a smirk. Still, I will do as you command, Tutaku.